Toast, 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 toast. Here we go. Check, check. What's up, Duners? Let's go. Ready? Check, check. Muad'Dib. Let's go. Tonight we're talking Dune 2. What's up, Duners? Duners. We're Duners now. Doomers are no more. Yeah? We're Duners. All right? That's Alex. That's Alex. Uh, doing the Dune chant. All right, so tonight we're doing Dune 2 analysis, and this is full-on movie analysis. This is unusual in that I'm not doing any of the Dune books. I don't know the Dune books. We're a literary channel, but I don't know Dune. This is an outsider analysis. I'm not making any reference to the books. I don't know the books. I only know from what I've heard, and from videos I've watched and from what people have told me. Of course, I have gone straight into. I watched the entire um, Children of Dune miniseries on Sci-Fi, which is really good. I couldn't believe how good it was. It was very good. Of course, I watched David Lynch's Dune, which I don't like, and I've talked all about that before. But we're gonna be doing Dune 2 analysis tonight, and Dune the movies. So Dune and 1 and part 2, I guess. And so if you're a full-on Dooner, right, maybe this will help you to remember the whimsical sense of childlike joy you experienced when you first read Dune, or whatever. Okay, but I'm doing a serious analysis tonight on this movie. How's my volume? Right. Check, check, toast, toast. Okay, enough of that. So tonight I'm doing I'm doing Dune 2, and this is great. This is great. I talked about this on Joe Arthur last week on TNT, and I think that one hasn't aired yet. We pre-recorded that one. Says it's a bit low. Is it a bit low? Let's see. It's not low, says Slow Boy. I'm going with Slow Boy because Crystalline. Thank you, Crystalline. Appreciate it. I'm going with a backward speak. Yes, it sounds like backmasking. It is backmasking. It's throat singing or whatever, but it is backmasking, and I'm going to get into that. All right, so where should we start? First of all, let me just give you my initial take on this movie. So I went to see Dune 2 last week, and I will say I've been thinking about it constantly for a week now. It hasn't faded at all. This is pretty unusual for a film. It's very unusual for a film, and the excitement that I had watching the movie hasn't faded at all. And I'll try to give a balanced analysis of this film, but I mean, straight up, this is it's amazing. It's a great film. It's wild. It's immersive, and most importantly, it is not for children. It's not childish. It is full-on adult Hollywood film saga, and I think it's an important movie. And from the first second I walked in and the movie started until the end credits, I was totally into this movie. Of course, except for the middle where I got up to go smoke a cigarette outside and then got locked out of the theater. And then I was thump, thump, thump on the window till some Dune worm girl started slithering through the cinema lobby, saw me and got scared because, she saw the Muad'Dib. And then, anyway, some guy I happen to know opened the door, and I got back in. Anyway, so other than that, it was totally immersive. It was the first one was nominated for 6 Oscars, and I don't know what it won, but even though I just did the Oscars for this year, and I picked all the Oscars correctly except for that one, which was I picked the wrong song from Barbie, but I still got a Barbie song correct as the winner. So I knocked that one out of the park. But that's irrelevant for this, really, because this movie is incredible. And here's why I think it's incredible. I'm trying not to soy jack over the movie. Right? Oh, it's so good. It is good. It's great. It's really great. Now, your personal opinions about watching the movie might differ. That's fine. This is all my opinion. But I'm going to give you my opinions about why I think it's great according to the way Hollywood's been making movies and about what the story means, according to me, an outsider who does not know the books or the lore. All of the lore that I know is like in the last week. So here's why I think it's good or great. Here's why I think it's great. It's great because it is completely different from every movie that we've seen in the past, few years, except for the first one. It is thoughtful. It paces well. It's deliberate. It's not cheesy or cheeseball. It's not childish. It is not. It's not derivative. It's not pedantic. It's not It's not any of those things. But here's what it is. It's high-minded. It's immersive. It's brilliant, dark, and the sound is overwhelming at times. The characters are well drawn out and well thought out. I mean, it's crazy because so much happens in the movie in like 15-minute segments. There's so much that happens, but it's not expository. It's not exposition. It's not like they're telling me things about the story that I need to know that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. It's just the story happens and I'm learning through it and I go through it. And so, for instance, here's an example. Everybody's seen the first one, I'm sure. The Denis Villeneuve first movie. So, for instance, there's a scene in the first one where Paul Atreides, who's Timothy Chalamet, is back on his home planet and he's chilling in his room. He's just gone through the I think he's just gone through the Bene Gesserit ritual, right? The initiatory scene where he has to put his hand in the box and he confronts pain, right, with the Bene Gesserit witch. And then he goes back inside and he's chilling at his house. Is this when he's on? This is when he's on Arrakis in his new house, I think. Yeah. So he's on Arrakis, and we see the little DARPA mosquito Gil Bates stinging machine like make its way through the wall, and it's like floating through the wall and then floating through the air, and then it like he hears it, and he stands up and he like stands up and there's a holograph machine that he's learning from, and he sees the little muskrat, and he's like hiding in the holographic weeds, right? And the thing comes at him, and then it comes right up to his eyeball, and he catches it, and then they learn it's an assassination attempt from a gooner in the wall, right? They embedded a gooner in the wall with an Oculus machine. Okay, well, the setup for that scene is that Paul is watching his Zoom call remote learning of the holographic machine, of the way that the reeds and the various flora and fauna, if there is any on Arrakis, works. But what's cool about the scene that you realize is that this could be exposition and it's giving the audience something to learn about the future muskrat thing. But the way they play it is that Paul is like a teenager, and he's at school basically, and he's interested in Arrakis, and he wants to know everything about it. And so when he sees the little muskrat, he gives a little smile, and he kind of stands up and he looks at it, and that's interesting to him, and we see through him that it's interesting. And later on in Dune 2, when he picks his name, the Fremen ask him for his name, and he picks a name, and the name is like the muskrat name or whatever. I'm sure somebody will know. I don't know that it's like Ubud or something. I don't know what. I don't know. I'm an outsider for this. But he picks the muskrat name, and that's when Javier Bardem, right, says, like, no, it's very serious. Right, this is very important for this land. Right, he's very small, he's humble. This is exactly what the Muad'Dib would say, right? But that's cool. That's a cool scene. It's beautiful and it's brilliant, and all of the various elements in the scenes, they relate between the first and the second movie, and it lets me know, an outsider to this film, exactly what is happening, right? And then I learned all about the Yitzhak's cataract. The Yitzhak's cataract, the Muad'Dib, right? The Bene Gesserit. I love the language of the movie because, and of course of the books, which I haven't read. And by the way, that I'm gonna read these books. I'm gonna read all 6 of the books, and I'm gonna be totally immersed into this, because when I go through this kind of thing, I get into the deep rabbit hole, and I'm gonna go all through the thing. It's kind of like Isaac learning about Twin Peaks. Right. Isaac was late to the Twin Peaks thing. I'm late to Dune, and that's okay. I totally avoided sci-fi when I was younger. I didn't care about reading sci-fi books. I read sci-fi fantasy only in that I read the High King series, and I read C.S. Lewis. I read all the C.S. Lewis books when I was in about first grade, and I was obsessed with them. I loved them. I loved the names of the books and all the characters, and I read them out of order. The first one I read was was the Voyage of the Dawn Treader because I remember the cover of the book. Even the cover of the book to me, I used to stare at the cover of that book, and I was obsessed with the cover of it. I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe like last. I read, I think I read second. I read the Silver Chair, and then all the C.S. Lewis books are like great song titles or band names from the '90s, right? Even Prince Caspian. Prince Caspian is a Fish song. um, but back to Dune 2. There's nothing in this that I found, you know, I didn't find it silly. There was no silliness. Even the silliness in the Marvel movies, for instance, like I went back and watched Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. like 2 weeks ago, and it's a good movie. It's very good. It's cool. All the other ones are whatever. But the problem with Marvel movies is what they became, and they're based on child comic books. So what does that say about culture and about society? Well, I don't think on the surface it's bad. We like escapism. We like adventure, sense of adventure. We like all of that stuff. But the problem is that the movies are made by adults and they star adults and they're for adults, but they're for adults harkening back to their childhood, right? So it's a kind of, I don't mean this, I'm kind of taking this far, but it's like they're infantilizing people. And then, of course, the problem is that the Marvel movies and the superheroes became replacement for religion, in a deep way, where we expect the superhero, not even the Nietzschean Ubermensch. Like, we're talking about the superhero, the kind of interstellar superhero. That's what's going to save us. But we know that those people, we know that doesn't exist. So then it leads to a kind of deadening atheistic spirit, right? I mean, am I right about that? I think we all kind of see that now. It's just colors and fun and out of this world sort of villains and superheroes, and it gets to be annoying, right? But now that Marvel is dead, I mean, they are not for the last 14 years or so. It's been a constant series of Marvel movies and the furthering of the Marvel universe, and those are the big blockbusters and the big movies, and Hollywood could count on that. But that's over now. I think we've seen the end of that. We'll see a couple more movies come out, little drips and drabs of those movies. But I think that Dune 2 has changed Hollywood. I think we're in the process of seeing that. And actually, while I was watching the movie, I thought that consciously. I thought, this is going to change everything. This is going to change the way movies are made, the way people think about movies, and the way that movies look. So first of all, the movie does have that kind of Rick Owens, French industrial techno sort of, a high fashion leather look. That's a combination of like Mad Max and I mean it is purely Dune, but it's something that's dark, but it's not gothy like the Matrix became. It's not computer goth, and that's different. And speaking of computers, one of the great things about this I've learned is that there's no AI, there's no artificial intelligence, because Skynet has taken over the world, and there was a war against the computers prior to the Dune, universe that we're seeing. And so that's why in the first movie we have the guy from Law and Order, that I had Thanksgiving with that time, right? He's got the like little Android soul patch, and he's sitting there and he's like, right. So they're biological computers. So the computers are mutated with humans, so we have human computers, right? The guy who's like, he's like, hold on. He's like, hold on a second. Yes, they're on their way. These guys are called mentats, is what I've learned, right? And the other thing you notice when you're watching Dune 2 is that I think there are none. I think there are no scenes inside ships. Like, so the Highliners are these gigantic ships that are used for space travel, right? For space-time travel. And that's how the universe is able to function because we're off world, we're off Earth, and so they're able to fold space. And the navigators who do that with the use of spice. Spice is essential for space travel, and like the whole Dune universe is completely absorbed in spice. Everybody's addicted to this thing. Now, spice, obviously in Dune 2, for me, it was obvious to me that spice is Drino, especially the way that Rebecca Ferguson, the mother, has to become the new High Witch or whatever. And the way that we see, you remember so in Dune 2, there's a scene where she's a little person and she's like a leathery rawhide looking person. She goes in and she catches a little baby worm, and then she extracts the spice, right? And she drowns it in water, and then out of that she extracts the blue juice. Well, that's Adreno, right? At the moment of greatest fear, drowning the baby worm, she extracts the blue juice from the pineal gland, right? And then she drinks it, and when she drinks it, she sees when they're on spice, especially Paul, the Reverend Mother. Thank you, Melly. Whenever Paul is on spice, because the people on Arrakis are like blue-eyed and absorbed in spice. It's all, when the sun is low, you can see the spice shimmering in the dune folds. It's pretty cool, but they are absorbed in it, and the rest of the galaxy is like addicted to this stuff. But Paul's able to have preternatural vision, clairvoyancy, and then eventually the whole point of the movie is that they call him the Muad'Dib, and so he's the Dune Messiah, or they think he is. But the people on Arrakis, especially the fundamentalists in the South, they call them, are hesitant about this, and this is going to lead to a holy war because the Bene Gesserit, the witch sisterhood, is running the Felix Springmeier bloodlines, and they want to bring about they want to immunize the eschaton or whatever, right? They want to bring about the Muad'Dib. Well, it turns out that, and this is what I learned in Dune 2, is that they expected a female to be born of Rebecca Ferguson, right? So, because the Reverend Mother is going to give the blue juice, it can only be drunk by a woman because a man can't handle the whatever of it, okay? But eventually Paul's going to drink it. Now that will be the true Yitzhat's cataract, okay? But what happens is that when Rebecca Ferguson drinks the blue juice, they don't know that she's pregnant, and so her unborn infant child inside her stomach also gets immediately awoken and has full consciousness. So then we see Rebecca Ferguson like talking to her baby, but they think she's like dissociating, and they're funny scenes. Like she's walking around and she's like, yes, we must go to the desert. Huh? Yes, that's right. No, I wasn't talking to you. Hold on. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. I think she says in the movie, huh? And I always find it interesting that in a serious movie where all of the dialogue is so heavy and it's so deliberate, when a character says the word huh, like, do you remember in Apocalypse Now? Do you live near the river? The Ohio River, sir? Uh-huh. So I went back into the script and I looked whether that was in there, and it wasn't. It was just Brando ad-libbing. But there are other funny things in this. First of all, I thought it was funny that there's okay, I just drank the blue juice. Hold on. Okay, I've seen everything. Damn. I went into the deep spice world and I saw the all-seeing eye. And it looked like a worm and like we were in deep ocean water. What's that mean, man? Well, that means that Arrakis is going to be oceanic again. Okay, if they're going to bring about the water. But then if it's oceanic, that means that there's going to be no more spice. So the Emperor Godworm, the Yitzhat's cataract, Leto II, is going to be fused with the worm. and he's going to have total control over the spice. That's what I learned from Children of Dune and from our friend Real John Connor out there who let me into some Dune lore. Okay. Oh, wait, shit, it's just Gatorade? Damn, dude. That Seek at the store told me it was the blue juice. Okay. Well, what was that worm that he was holding that he got it from? Damn, that's not good. So, oh, and then the Spice Girls. Yeah, I saw the Spice Girls on there. I mean, look, so there is a scene where at the end of the movie, like a dude is standing, this doesn't give anything away yet, but there's a dude standing there and he's like, bring me the dagger. And there's a guy in the background and he's holding the dagger and he goes like this. He goes, what now? Oh, okay, here. And he like hands it to him. And I thought it was funny because all of the background characters, there's so much serious content in this that all the background characters, it's like you got to remember that they're living in the world and that there's a world and they have to like do regular things. So the background character has been tasked with holding the knife. He's like, what do I do? What do I do? Do I hold it? Do I hand it to this guy? Is this it? But then I realized, I forget who it was that kind of helped me realize this, but then I realized that no, actually, that's not the reason he does that. The reason he does that is because everybody else who's handed anything to this guy in the movie gets their throat cut. So, of course, he's going to be like, now? Okay, so here's what happens in Dune 2. So, we start off with Paul Atreides, who's played by Timothy Chalamet, and we've got Zendaya, who's playing Zendaya. Or no, her name's Johnny. Her name's Johnny. He kept thinking he was calling her Johnny, but I guess it's Johnny. And I'm going to call her Johnny. So Paul Atreides, I walk in, and so hold on. Let me start over. So the movie starts off with this. And that means whoever control over spice is control over all, right? So that's different from the first movie where it was dreams or messages from the deep. And we have, that's our epigraph for the movie. Then we go into it, and it immediately picks up from first Dune, right? So in the first movie, we had the Harkonnens come back to Arrakis, and there's a war against the House Atreides, and they defeat them, and Paul Atreides makes his way out to Arrakis Dune with Rebecca Ferguson. And I guess Arrakis means Dune, right? They say that in the movie. Remember, it was in the first movie because Stellan Skarsgård goes, my Arrakis, my Dune. And he's floating up in the air. So he's a kind of black Rick Owens, Lucifer, Judge Holden. I mean, he is Judge Holden. He's Blood Meridian Judge Holden in this. Slash Kurt's Apocalypse Now. There's the scene in the first one where he comes out of the black goo. He's got his gigantic hand like going over his bald head. That is straight out of Apocalypse Now, right? So anyway, so it picks up with them, and he's out there with the Anton Chigurh people, Stilgar, and he is now sort of one of them. But now the problem is that when he's with the Iraqians, who are in Iraq, I guess, right? They're in desert. They hold this thing that's oil. It's Iraq. The Iraqians, I guess, right? That makes sense. So he's out there with them, and they don't trust him. They think that he's an outsider, and they're looking for the Muad'Dib because right when he arrived to Arrakis, he was with his mother, and then people keep saying things to him in the first one, like they say it in native Farsi or whatever. I know I'm mixing up a whole bunch of stuff, and they're like, oh, we will know him by seeing him with his mother. And then when Stilgar came in to meet the Iraqians in the first one, remember when he spit and we had Duncan Idaho, and he's like, thank you for the gift of your precious fluids. And then Paul says something to him, and he turns to him, and he's like, I know you. But he says it in Iraqian. Well, Paul picks up the language really quickly. That's one of his great powers in this. Not a superpower. He just learns the thing. So he's out there with Zendaya, and he and Zendaya are starting to become besties. But she's looking at him with those beautiful blue eyes, and she's thinking, damn, this man kind of handsome. And he's thinking, okay. And they start doing operations, raids and operations against the Harkonnen spice miners. And this is pretty cool because now we get into a world where we see the spice miners and what they are. And at times, it's funny because, like, they got these big hulking machines that are coming by with these teeth. And they're like, the spice is on the surface of the planet. Right? We can see it shimmering and stuff. But it was like those Jawa machines in Star Wars where, you get the little guys come out. But that's not who's driving the thing. But anyway, they come out, and it turns out there are ambushes, right? And it shows how, first of all, future world is full of DEWs and laser machines, and yet it's funny because the weapons are not they're not AI weapons. These are all like held by dudes or whatever. But the coolest thing at the beginning of the movie, I thought this was super cool. The coolest thing, this is what really sold me on this movie right away. I wasn't sold on the first one when I saw it right away. I think I told you guys in another stream that I watched it and I was kind of like, I still wasn't into it. And then a friend told me, listen, man, you got nothing to do on Saturday? Just watch Dune like 3 times. So I did. I actually did. And then I was totally in. Now I've seen the movie like 20 times. I'll probably watch it again after this. But there's a scene where it goes 0, and we see the black cube like floating down to the earth, and then we see the Harkonnen bad dudes like float out of the thing, and they get down to earth, and they got these big black suits on, right? So they can't breathe in the spice, I guess, and they're chilling. Well, they know that the big spice worm is going to come for them because of the noise, so they got to get over this mountain. All right, this is super cool. The way that they went up the mountain was radical. And I thought this right here is probably what's going to change the way that Hollywood makes movies, because they float up the mountain, and then we see sand and ground, and the dude is like floating over the sand like he's swimming. And I've seen a lot of movies. And when we see movies and we have special effects like that, I can't explain how it looks different, but it looks different, and it doesn't look okay. So let me take it back. So in the 80s, special effects were done with blue screen. When we see like digitized special effects, we see it with blue screen. Now, before that, 2001: Space Odyssey is incredible, and we see all of but it's analog. It's crazy because it's about a digital world and AI, but we see analog set design. So like when the dude is in 2001 is running and he's boxing, and we see how it's in a gravity machine or whatever, so they have gravity. Well, we can see that it was built, that all of the things were built. So they're physical, concrete, and the guy's running, and that's an actual machine inside Shepperton Studios or wherever it was. Yeah. And then when we have Star Wars, we're watching it, but as adults, we know that when things come in and blow up things, we're probably focusing on it with a model. It's a miniature model. Okay. And then in the 80s, we have blue screen, and the blue screen is crazy because at the time when I was a kid, the blue screen effect made it look cool, like I was in another world, but we learn when we get older that we notice that there's an outline around the people, and that he's been digitally inserted into this thing. It's a blue screen, so it's on a screen. And then we got CGI, where everything is made up in post-production, and it's computerized, and it doesn't look real to us at all. It doesn't look real. People thought it looked cool, but it doesn't look real. And then we have green screen, where we are actually acting in front of a gigantic green screen, and the physical things are built onto the set, but they are added with computers like in real time. So it's different from blue screen. But this is something totally different. This looked to me like I'm a 43-year-old man, and I'm watching this movie and I'm going, how the fuck did they do that? That is really cool. This looks so real, but it looks super cool. It looks like Like I believe this is happening right now. I don't even want to know how this is done, but it looks very, very cool. And I think that Villeneuve has an aesthetic palette that he's used in all of his movies. It's kind of like we see plenty of Gnostic eggs flying out of things like in Arrival, and we see the kind of dark um, Apple Store thing, like with prisoners. There's a dark palette. We see plenty of that. But it's also crazy that this dude's body of work is Prisoners, Arrival, Sicario. There's some cash. Yo, we got some support in here. Thank you so much. I'll get to those in a second. Sicario, all these things. He's got an excellent body of work. It's so good. This guy's really good. He's the top. Is he the top? He's got to be the top right now. He's got to be the top because this has changed. This is going to change everything. They're gonna make movies where instead of having a $200 million budget and we watch the movie and we go, okay, it's cool, but where did all the money go? What is there money laundering going on? Which is probably the case. But instead of all that, I watched this movie and I went, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody told me this movie cost it cost a zillion spice bucks to make this movie, but I believe it. I believe every Satter coin that they spent on this movie went into the movie. It looks so. It's not that it looks expensive. It just looks so fucking cool. Sorry for my language. It is really, really cool. So they're floating and they're going across or whatever. Anyway, so what happens in the movie is Paul fights these dudes and he wins. And one thing is, every time he's in a battle, it's like we know he's gonna win. We know he's gonna win. I know the point of that, but that's okay because that's dramatic irony. But when he gets back to the people of Arrakis and he starts getting let into their culture, which is obviously highly insular. We have the Stilgar character, who is Anton Chigurh or Javier Bardem, who is by far the coolest character in this. I mean, he's so cool. He's funny. And here's what I'll say about the acting in the movie. When you get, okay, how do I say this? A lot of times in a film, for instance, let's take an Emma Stone film. I'm watching an Emma Stone film. Or, okay, here's a better example. In Children of Dune, the TV show, where James McAvoy plays Leto II, or Leto II as they call him. When you watch it, my criticism of him is that I can tell that he's acting. And it's very odd and off-putting. And he's fine in the movie, but he's reading the script in his mind as he says the words. So James McAvoy does this thing, and it's not just in that; it's in every movie. Like, let's say I'm reading this. This is from Crash. Let's say I'm reading this from Crash, and I'm saying the words. It's like if he says, "I knew that Vaughn had retired." If that's his line, okay. Here's what he does. He goes, "I knew that Vaughn had retired," like that, or. And I knew that Vaughn had retired. I knew that Vaughn had retired. I knew that Vaughn had retired. Stop pausing. Stop pausing and stop looking away and then looking at the camera. Stop looking in different directions in the middle of the line and then looking at the camera to say your line. That doesn't indicate that you are human or that you are saying words that you actually thought in real time. You're not coming up with the words in the body of your language in your body. What you're doing is looking for the words on the page of the script. So it doesn't work. But what Javier Bardem does in this movie is every word that he says is a word that he is the character saying the words, and they come from his soul. He is. I believe him. I believe I don't know how to explain this, but when I watch the movie, I believe that he is the character. I don't see Javier Bardem anymore. I see this dude. Now, I'm aware in my conscious mind that I'm watching a movie, and I'm aware that it's Javier Bardem, an actor I've seen before. But my suspension of disbelief goes hard in this movie. I am completely involved and immersed in the story. And so when Stilgar, every time Stilgar says he's the Muad'Dib and he's trying to convince the other guys on Arrakis that this is the guy, like all of the signs are pointing to him. He's playing a John the Baptist character, right? He's a wild looking guy who lives on the outskirts of society, and he seems to be of pure heart, and he wants to usher in the Messiah. So when I see him, and he has a joy. There's a joy and a sense of laughter. And in fact, he jokes in the movie. There are great scenes in the movie where he says something and then he contradicts what he just said and he laughs. It's mainly when he does the worm surfing. Okay, but he tries to tell the people, and it's very funny because he'll be like, "You are the great man. You are the hero." And then Paul will say, like, "I'm no hero." And he's like, "That's exactly what the hero would say," right? And it's very funny. It's cool. But he goes through a series of trials, and one of these trials is, of course, he has to go out into the wilderness and wander. And so the whole thing sets up a kind of, there are Christian allegorical elements in this where Paul is playing or we think that he's playing a Christ-like hero. But what's really interesting that I found about this was that, and this is what separates Dune from other sci-fi movies for me, is that that Dune is not a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or an off-world, or a multiverse, or something that's not human. It's that all of these people are human, and they come from humans, and there was Earth. It's just way in the future. So in other words, that means to me that no matter whether there's the Emperor Godworm or the Muad'Dib or any of this stuff, Christ is still the king of the universe, and this is a world where the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit still rule over all, and it's just they've gone off-world because of the war with the thinking machines, and it's in the future, and they've discovered space travel, and all this is happening, but God still rules the world. In the life of the universe, it's like they're still human. Does that make sense? I found that pretty profound in this movie, and totally different from other movies. That's one of the things I really liked about it. I also learned that now I thought this was cool, that the way that the Highliners work and the navigators is that the navigators are totally in spice pods, and that their bodies over time have kind of mutated. So even in the first one, there's that scene where the Bene Gesserit witch walks in and she's going to talk to Harkonnen, and there's like a spider that's like drinking water, and she's like, "Tell the creature to leave." And what's his face is like, he doesn't understand our language. She's like, "Leave," and it's like, and it like walks off. Well, that's a human, right? It's a human mutant, but it's still a human, and that reminded me of Brave New World, where we have genetic modification that leads to these inhuman creatures, but they still have a human basis. Because remember, the Epsilons are created in the lab, but they're mutated to the there's a distance. There's a distance from humans where the Epsilons are born out of test tube juice, so that they will be little homunculoids walking on the outer edges of the rockets that are used for for Earth travel. And they have to be like that in order to fix the rocket on the outside in low oxygen. But they still come from humans. But they're kind of chimera, but they're like a human. They're gub human animal hybrids, but they still come from humans. The other great thing about the film is that there are no cutesy walking. What's that animal? Oh, it's the mabunkalo. It's the mabunkalo, right? And they show an animal and it's walking in the dune. And it's like, deep, 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 right? And it's like, oh, it's cute. There's none of that shit, right? You remember in Stargate, right? Or in Star Wars, there's no saber-toothed tiger walking cutesy little fur animals. There's none of that. There's like no animals, and that's because of the Skynet war. But it's also, it takes out the element of, the children are going to like this movie. There's none of that appeals to. There's no Chewbacca, right? There's none of that, and I found that really cool. It was the world is like totally immersive. Now I know that occurs later when Arrakis, like after this gets starts to become aquified, and the worms start to go away, and it becomes ocean. And that I only know that because part of the prophecy in this is that like Paul sees visions of ocean. He sees water, like he's standing on the edge of the ocean, and that Zendaya's like, "Oh, what's this thing called ocean or whatever?" So I know that. And I was kind of confused at the time because I'm thinking, is this a vision of his own island? I mean, of his own island world, his where he came from in Dune 1. Also, just to bring it back to Dune 1, I know I'm kind of going all over the place here, but in Dune 1, what I really liked was there's a oh man, this is a great scene. This was moving, and I didn't really catch this the first time. I had to go back and watch it, and then I really caught it because Oscar Isaac plays Leto, and so he's trained by Josh Brolin and Duncan Idaho. He tells Duncan Idaho his dreams and all that stuff. But there's this one scene where he's talking to his father, and Paul is talking to his father, and he's like, they're walking along, and his father's walking amongst the graves of his ancestors in, he's obviously on a Scottish island, right, where it was filmed. Caladan. Yeah, Caliban. They're in the Tempest Caliban world. So he's walking along, and there's a great scene where Paul says, "So, what are we going to do, Father? Are we going to?" And Leto says, "No, we're going to go to Arrakis. This is what we're doing now. The Emperor has taken the Harkonnens off Arrakis, and they've been there for 80 years, and now he's giving it to us, and we have to go there." And Paul says this thing, which is very true for teenagers. This edgy thing. He says, "Why? So we can oppress the Iraqians just like everybody else has?" And his father turns to him and he says, "No. That's not what we're doing. Here we had air power and we had sea power. Well, there we're going to cultivate desert power. We're going to make friends with the Iraqians, and regardless of the geopolitical sort of allegory that we see in all of this, right? Where we're going to have gangs and counter gangs, or we're going to, any of that stuff. What he says to him here is pure. I like this. He says we're going to do that, and there will be many dangers. And Paul, because he's a teenager, says. He's basically like, what? Will there be space pirates? Rebellion? And he's like, no, you don't understand. That's not what the danger is. This is something this is an adult danger. And I want you to come and sit on one of the councils with me and learn what I do. Because this whole world is going to revolve, it's going to be reliant on you. You have to inherit this power because I won't be here anymore, and you'll have to do it. And this is, I really like this. So Paul says, what if I don't want to, right? What if I feel like I can't do this, or what if I don't want to do this? And his dad says, I thought the same thing you did when my dad put me here, but he gave me this ring. And he says, I didn't know you felt like that, because he assumes his dad is his dad, and he'd always been his dad. But his dad says, no, you don't understand. It's a very human moment, and this really got me. He says to him, whether you want to when the time comes, whether you say yes or no, you'll always be my son. And I thought that was very, very good. That's the difference between the Atreides and the bad guys. And it sold me on the movie. It was very human. It was very loving. There was love. And so Paul is going to have to carry that into the future. And now he's going to get into he gets into all the power plays and becoming the Muad'Dib, because he wants to get the Iraqians to fight against the Harkonnens and the bad guys. But one thing I don't get about the Harkonnens is this. So in part 2, this is where this logically doesn't make sense to me. So in part 2, Harkonnen has gotten his son, I guess it's his son, who is the big guy who's in Blade Runner 2049, another Denis Villeneuve movie. What's the name of it? Batista. He gets Dave Batista to go back and ramp up the spice production, but it's being hampered by the operations of the Iraqians, right, who are blowing up the spice mines and all this stuff. And he can't hack it. So then he brings in his nephew, and his nephew is Austin Butler Elvis, and he's like pure Prometheus, bald, you know, he's a gray man. He's one of the gray man watchers, okay? And immediately when he comes in and they give him a dagger, he gets they hand him the dagger, and he's like and he like cuts his tongue, right? So now he's got a fork tongue. But you're like, oh, this guy's bad enough. Yeah, he's bad enough to run this. The guy cuts his damn tongue with a dagger. You're supposed to cut your food with it, son. Okay, but he's bad. Okay, but here's the thing. Every time anybody does anything in their world, it's always according to hate, deceit, and power. But if that's the case, how do they ever do anything? You can only thrive on that for so long. You can't, if there's no love, if there's no positive energy, there's no virtue, if it's all vice, then they can't make anything, including more Harkonnens. So why would anybody have any loyalty to anybody? They would just be trying to deceive them all the time. It doesn't seem like it works to me. Of course, it does work. It does work in the life of the movie. And he puts his nephew through this trial where he puts him into a gladiator bout on the planet Gaiety Prime, which is, Jamie told me this, that the reason they look like that is because they have a black sun. So it makes sense. You see all these gray men, Prometheans, like in this gigantic stadium, and out comes Harkonnen, played by Stellan Skarsgård, who's fucking so good in this movie, dude. But he's got this ball and chain Death Star bauble that he's got to carry around with him because he was poisoned in the last movie when he went up into the ceiling. And he's like, right? Remember that? Because Leto sacrificed himself in order to get rid of the others. But at the last minute, Harkonnen put on the body shield, and so he wasn't fully poisoned. That's why he's got to bathe in the black goo and do all this stuff. Right? It's very Vader-esque, but he's not exactly Vader. And we know he's not going to be redeemed by anything good, especially loyalty to his family like Vader was. And Vader was once good. This guy doesn't seem to ever have been good. Or Seth says, the Harkonnens are portrayed as stupid, and they're all Scandinavian people, like in Star Wars, where all Imperials were. I didn't think they were portrayed as stupid. They were portrayed as. I thought they were portrayed differently in this. You're right that they were portrayed differently in the second one than the first one, but I didn't think they were portrayed as stupid. They were portrayed as sinister and plotting and devious and evil, but they didn't do as much in this one. But it was still amazing how I think it was just full of kind of brute power. But I didn't think that they were stupid. I mean, if anything, Harkonnen is the evil genius of all time, right? So they have this gladiator, but thank you for the comment. Gladiator bout where they put Austin Butler down there with the people. Oh, another thing I realized was that when I was talking to Jamie about this was that the reason that they look like they do in Prometheus, right, in Ridley Scott's Prometheus, is that they're both designed by H.R. Giger. He did the design work for the Harkonnens and also for Prometheus, right? Alien Prometheus. So they all have this kind of, they're bald, black sun, black eyes kind of look to them, right? So anyway, so he fights the guys in the gladiator bout, and they bring out 3 prisoners, and the 3 prisoners are all Chads from Atreides, and that's cool because one thing we get is we don't see. I mean, obviously the Harkonnens are bad dudes, right? The scene in the first movie when we're getting the prologue for what's happened in the world, and we see that we see the lines of Kim Jong-un, North Koreans, and all the lines of the people like it's the Nazi Soviet diabolical lines of troops, and there's the big balcony, and Dave Bautista walks out there, and he stands up on the step, and he looks out, and he's very good. he breathes in this power, and we see that they had immense wealth beyond the wildest dreams of anybody, because it's a whole world, a whole planet made up of adreno, fentanyl, opium, heroin, cocaine, crack, soma, psychedelic spice juice. The whole world is made up of that. So it's immense, immense power. Well, in this one, we see all those people in the stadium, and it's all sort of, it's not black and white. It's like, it's just a black sun. But we see the Chads from Atreides come out, and the Atreides are human. They are also powerful, but they run on loyalty, and they have life. They have a life force to them. So they come out, but they've been MK ultraing and bleeding two of the guys, but not. And then they dope two of the guys, except for one guy. And one guy, this is the last Ronin, right? So the two guys come out, and I'm like, oh damn, here comes Chad Chadson, and he starts fighting, and Austin Butler's got to fight him. And then in the background, you see his little matadors, and this is interesting because it is a kind of a bullfight, which leads back to the first one. Because remember, the thing they box up from Earth, the most like valuable artwork that Atreides has, is the head of a bull, right? And then Paul, at one point in the first one, is looking at the toy as a kind of Art Deco, surrealistic looking Salvador Dali matador and a bull. And we see that, well, the reason I like that in the first one is because instead of looking at toys, he's looking at a little statue of something that means war, right? It means war, and you gotta remember in Zoolander? No, not Zoolander. Dodgeball. That painting is called "Taking the Bull by the Horns." It's not literal, but it is. I did it. I didn't really do it, but I did. Taking the bull by the horns. Anyway, so he's looking at that. So in this, there's the Matador gladiator fight, and there are these little, like, Mandarin-looking, all black beings with these heads, and they've got like little daggers for fingers, and they're like, and snip, 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 right? And Austin Butler's like, stay away! And he's got the black goo in his mouth. The whole movie looked like he had black goo in his mouth. And he's got to fight the dudes. Well, anyway, he kills Chad Chadson, and then here comes Z. Michael Chad. Z. Michael Chad, he kind of fights, but he's all doped up, right? No, and he can't get the guy, but he puts up a good fight. But he kills Z. Michael Chadson and Chad Chadson, and then comes the last Ronin. Now, the last Ronin drugged up, and he insists on fighting himself, and this guy puts up a good fight. Well, the last Ronin dies, and anyway, he what's his name? Moth Ratha? Moth Ratha makes his way through the initiation, and Harkonnen is up there in the balcony with his ball and chain, a black Death Star ball and chain, and he says, yes, good, good. He let the hate flow through him, and he won. So now he's going to take over the spicing. Well, he sets up some ambushes, and they try to get the Iraqians, and there's lots of DEW laser fights, and they're all great. Eventually they find the temple. Now, the temple that they go into in this one is cool because it's like a Iraqi, Mesopotamian, Anunnaki, Egyptian temple, and it's got all these hieroglyphics in the walls. And we also I learned when they fight the bad guys, and they're like, ugh, they empty out all their human juices from them, and that's what they're going to use to live off of. Because there's a scene where when they rescue Rebecca Ferguson, the witch mother or whatever, she's pregnant and she's about to puke, and Javier Bardem says, "No, don't puke, don't puke, don't do it." And then she throws up, and he's like, "Oh man," because you can't lose any of your precious bodily fluids on this place. Like when they're going to drink something, they got to drink spit, right? And the way that they bury people is they suck out all their juices, and they take them back to the temple, and then they empty them into this big pool. And when I saw that in the movie, I was like, damn, this place must stink on the inside. They got 10,000 years of body juices in this place. This place stank. But I guess there's not really any insects. But there are insects because at the end of the movie, okay, well, I'll get to that. Well, what Javier Bardem says is that like we keep all of our ancestors in this pool, you know, and everybody who's died is in this pool, and that's where we're gonna keep them, right? Um, so so yes, thank you for dropping that PayPal. Yeah, please support me, you guys. You can do that through PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, and Super Chat. So those are the 4 that we're using right here. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So, where was I? The temple. Okay, so then we meet the witch mothers, and they got the witch cult there, and there's an old lady. Okay, now she's a blind seer, and she's a Tiresias figure here, right? Like in Oedipus. And there's going to be Oedipal elements to this because I learned in Children of Dune that Paul Atreides is going to go on to be blinded by the nukes or whatever, the atomics, but he's still going to be able to see, but he's going to wander the earth like Cain or like Oedipus. But I don't really know much more about that, right? So the witch mother meets Rebecca Ferguson, and Rebecca Ferguson has been chosen as the replacement for the witch mother there, and she's got to do this. And to do this, you got to drink the blue juice. You got to drink the spice juice, okay? You got to have the DMT trip, and you got to access your memories and do all this stuff. Well, drinking the spice juice is crazy because this is a sacred juice that they get in the ayahuasca sand jungles, and it can only be consumed by a woman, and it's pure blue juice from the pineal gland of the kid worm, okay? And they got to kill the kid worm to do this. And that's crazy because the worms on the planet are all sacred, and they know how to get around the worms, and they know how to ride the worms, but the worms are essential to their whole universe because they create the spice. Okay, well, so she drinks the blue juice, and when she does this, her vision is intense, and we see a wound, we see water, we see blue, we see a worm, and we see an all-seeing eye. So now she's accessed her all-seeing eye because her pineal gland is opened up, and she's in touch with the worm god on this place. Okay, and then the other witch mother, the old hag, the Hagrid lady, she says, she is pregnant. So now we learn 2 people have accessed this. Okay, and that's because she's pregnant, and that's gonna. Okay, so here's a big spoiler. So she got pregnant because. Wait, hold on. We learned the big spoiler is we learned that her Rebecca Ferguson, the witch mother. Sorry, there's a lot of elements trying to keep all this fucking shit straight, you guys. Like I said, I'm an outsider to this. All right, I'm kind of making my way through this in real time. So her dad is actually Harkonnen, right? Stellan Skarsgård. So we learn that Paul Atreides is the grandson of the bad guy Harkonnen. So he's both a Harkonnen and an Atreides. Right? That's crazy. Am I right? Am I right so far? Come on, I got some real Duners in here. I know you guys know what's right and what I'm wrong about. So that's her granddad. Okay, well, anyway, this means that her unborn child, whose name is Aaliyah, is going to be totally conscious, and then she's going to grow up and unfortunately be in a plane crash with a helicopter plane with Kobe, okay? And that fucking sucks, okay? But Aaliyah is played by Anya Taylor-Joy and in the next movie, but she's only in this movie for like a second, and you're thinking, oh, who's going to play Aaliyah? Who is it? And then they showed Aaliyah, and I went, oh. No, I didn't do that. I went, okay, it makes sense that she's in the movie because we have 3 witches in this movie, and they're all playing witches, okay? We get Charlotte Rampling, who is a witch. She played the same kind of witch character in Red Sparrow, and she played a witch in something else. I like Charlotte Rampling, but she plays a good witch. And Rebecca Ferguson, of course, played the witch mother in Dr. Sleep. Remember, where she was doing the exact same thing. She was extracting the fear juice from the pineal gland for Adreno from those people through her mouth and collecting it to take back to the Shining Hotel. Remember Dr. Sleep? Have you guys seen Dr. Sleep? Ah, man. That's good worm juice. And then we also got, who's the other witch? Oh, Anya Taylor-Joy, of course, played the witch in the movie The Witch. So we got a lot of witches in this damn thing. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of Macbethian elements in it, of course. What was the thing I just watched where there was another Macbeth element? That was with Coot. We covered Spring Breakers where they had the three witches. And then there was something else. There's something else I just covered where they said you got to act this way, but you can't pretend. It said it's but a painted devil, right? Pretend it's a movie. Yeah, that was Spring Breakers. Anyway, yeah, there's a big Macbethian witch ceremony where they go in and they got to drink from the cauldron, right? And that's essentially what Paul is doing. It's all of that comes from the Macbeth scene in the Shakespeare play, because he's got to go in, he's got to access the past and the future, and he's got to drink from the witch broth. And there's a bunch of witches surrounding him, and when he does that, he sees the future in mirrors, and that's what Macbeth does. That's how he's able to access the future in order to, and then that obviously kills him, because Banquo in the play says, oftentimes the instruments of darkness win us with honest trifles, only to betray us in deepest consequence. Well, that's why Macbeth dies. But in this, Paul is doing this because he is playing the role of the Muad'Dib, even though he doesn't believe it. Now, Zendaya and her friends are also from the north of Arrakis, and they don't believe any of this stuff. They say it's superstitious. But they got the John the Baptist character who's making the way for the Dune Messiah. And so I'm putting Harkonnen. You're putting emphasis on the wrong syllable. Is it Harkonnen? Why can't it be Harkonnen? Is it Harkonnen? It's Harkonnen? Harnoken. Okay, Harkonnen. Harkonnen the Barbarian. Does Frank Herbert tell us how to pronounce it in the Dune books? Tell me, Duners. Crystalline, are you a full-on Duner? That's pretty cool. The Harkonnen. Okay, I thought it was the Harkonnen because it's got a kind of a Finnish-looking Nordic term to it. So, what about Atreides? Am I right about Atreides? Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know how to pronounce the damn words. All right, I just went into this movie. All right. I mean, shit. I thought I was going to see the new Marvel movie. It's about space. Iron Man. I can pronounce that, huh? Tony Stark. It's 3 syllables. Damn Paul Atreides. No. Thank you, Crystalline. I appreciate it. Yeah, Duners rise up. For real, I mean, the Duners have taken over the Doomers, okay? And that means we're in an age of Aquarius. And, Zendaya is going to, I don't know, man. I don't fucking know. There's so much to this. Fuck. I thought this movie was awesome. I really did. I thought it was so cool. I'm totally obsessed with it now, and I'm gonna read the 6 books. I told my parents to go see it. They came back, and my mom said, "Can you explain to me what I just saw?" And I get that. I get that because there's so much stuff. There's so much damn stuff. I felt like that after I watched the first one. I'm like, okay, there's a lot going on here. I guess I gotta read the Wikipedia entry, which is all I did basically. Okay, all right. So let's get to the worm riding. Okay, because that's the cool part. Yes, thank you, Jason. Let me get to the worm riding. Okay, so here's what happens with the worm. Okay, so one of the last things that he's got to do. Yeah, I'm going to come back to you after all the books, for sure. Yeah. So one of the things that he's got to do in this is he's got to ride the worm. Okay, so how do I put this? So the worms are scurry, okay? They're very scurry. And when the bad dudes come, they have this little device that looks like a cleat, like a thing you put into the ground, and it's like a tent pole thing. You put it in the ground, but it's got this big tube on the top, and then they activate it, and it goes thump, 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 and it's rhythmic, okay? And that's going to call the worms, because But Neil deGrasse Tyson said, actually, this isn't true to life because sand is insulation and you can't hear anything in the sand. Shut the fuck up, Neil deGrasse Tyson, bitch. I mean, I'm sure you're a wonderful person. But, how do you know that beneath the sand it isn't all water? Right? How do you know? You don't know because it turns back into an ocean anyway. Right? You don't know what goes on in space. You can't go out into space, man, on 1/4, 2/5. What are you gonna land on a fraction? Right? That's dialectic physics, man. Dialectic logic says you either love somebody or you hate them. Right? That guy's a mutt. So I don't know. Whatever. But how do you know that the worms how do you know the worms can't hear through the sand? Because they're making all kind of passageways through the abyss. Right? The worms are in all seriousness, the worms are a Leviathan archetype in this, right? They are from the deep. Dreams are messages from the deep. When the lady drinks the blue juice, she accesses her deep mind, and the Yitzhat's cataract has to. One of the things that he achieves, I learned in Children of Dune, is that he can see the all past, all future, all present, all at once. And so one of the things that Paul does in this, when I'm watching this, I don't know what the answer is here, but when I'm watching this, he's obviously a messianic figure and he's a Christ-like hero, but he also is totally Byronic. He looks like a Byronic dark hero. He's all in black. He's got the same hair as Byron. He looks like he is standing on the edge of sea and fog of the ocean of sea and fog, right? Like in the painting. And he's kind of pale. He looks like Edward Scissorhands a little bit. And so when he drinks the blue juice and he goes down to the south to talk to the Sitch, to talk to the fundamentalists, this was super cool. We see him and we're wondering, how's he going to do this? Well, we see a God's eye view of the crowd, and there's like a zillion people in this crowd, and he's making his way through the crowd, and the ocean of people is parting for him. And it also looks like the people, Villeneuve did something really cool here. It looks like the people look like grains of sand, and they are moving out of the way for a worm. So when he makes his way into the thing in this big cavern, he walks up to the top, and he's standing there, and he's angry. And I thought, okay, is this going to be Christ-like? Is he going to start overturning the tables in the temple? But what he does here is, I started to think, is this guy a false prophet? Is he the Antichrist figure here? Because I know it's going to lead to the Holy War. But does that mean it's the Holy Revelation War? Like, because is he going to usher in a new heaven and a new earth in terms of the Dune universe? Right? Because he comes with a sword, right? He doesn't come with peace. He comes with a sword. And so he stands in the middle of this thing, and he starts talking to the people, and he can access their memories and their mind right away in real time. And I thought, is he doing this in an imitative sense, or is he a pure character in this? Do you guys know what I'm saying here in the chat? I mean, I don't know what the answer is because I don't know the books, but I'm just, that's why I'm doing an outsider analysis here. I'm trying to figure it out in real time. I'm just some dumbass dooner, proto-doomer. I haven't gone through the initiation yet of reading the books, but trying to figure this out. So I also wondered when he was talking to the dude, he's like standing in the middle of the thing, and he says, "You there, you were afraid," and he starts talking to the guy, and I was wondering, why is he picking on this little guy? This guy doesn't know nothing. He's just standing there on the edge of the crowd. Poor guy. But he's standing there, and he's talking to him, and then at the end, he's like, "I am William Wallace." Right? And I see a whole crowd of people. We will fight. No, we will run, and we will live. You will live for many years. And lying in your beds, you would wonder if you could take it all back for a chance. Just one chance. Right? He gives a rousing speech here. It also, of course, is, yes, Thomas Henderson, shouts out to Thomas Henderson. He says parallel with Muhammad, perhaps. There are, I mean, the whole thing. It's in the future, so there's a kind of kind of Byzantine aesthetic to the whole thing, and we have a future sort of East meets West, Sufi, Christian, Islamic. It's all kind of melded into this one thing for this new religion, right? I mean, the people have an Arabic language, and they are doing Arabic, Islamic style prayers, but they also have a sort of a Christian allegorical element. So it's kind of all into one. And he gives not a rousing speech. He gives a rousing speech. Jason Momoa, yeah, Token, you bring up a good point. In the first movie, in the first Dune, I was wondering when we were going to get more of Duncan Idaho, and I know he comes back in Children of Dune as a clone, and then kind of accesses his DNA to become sort of a real Duncan Idaho. But Momoa, I don't like Jason Momoa. I don't like him in Merman or any of that shit. But I got to say, he was perfect for that role. He was amazing. He was very good because I knew instantly when he arrived in the first one and Paul goes to talk to him that he was his mentor because he's bigger, he's stronger, he's got a light in his eyes, and he was he kind of had a light in his eyes the way that Yosemite Mountain Bear has a light in his eyes. You guys remember Yosemite Mountain Bear? Double rainbow all the way, full on, the joy of living. And he sacrifices himself for Paul, and he's a total warrior. He goes after him. He kneels for him because he's serving him, even though he's his mentor. I thought he was fantastic. He was very, very good. And there's even the scene in the first one where the Mentat guy goes to Katie Prime to talk about, yes, Church of the Eternal Logos. Shouts out to David Patrick Harry. He says, yeah, he did a good job. Self-sacrifice, great way to go out. Absolutely. And the way that he did it was super cool because it wasn't like he had to, it wasn't self-conscious in a way, and it wasn't like something that was put, I can't explain how it wasn't put on, but it was like he went after Paul, he went after his mom, he was there to save him, he nuked out like 400 of the bad guys, right? He's a supreme fighter. And then he goes there and he turns around. I thought this was cool. And I didn't notice this in the first one until Paul did it in this one. That their symbol is, he says, may that knife chip and break. And he does this thing, right? He does this hand sign with his dagger. And I didn't notice that Duncan had did that in the first one until I rewatched it. And that was the symbol for him, right? That this is it. He locks the door. I didn't like it in the first one, though, after he locked the door, that the other woman, the native woman, the Iraqian, says, he's locked the door. I was like, okay, we've been free of exposition and talking to us and telling us what we need, and then all of a sudden she comes in and does that. I thought that was kind of weak. But he sacrificed himself for Paul, and that was beautiful. He serves him. When he finds him, he kneels to him, and he says that he's sorry, right? There is a sense of service that the Atreides have. The father sacrificed himself for the family. Duncan Idaho sacrifices himself. Even the witch mother sacrifices herself in a way because she breaks from the code of the Bene Gesserit to do this, right? The Harkonnen do not do this. They do the exact opposite. Everything is self-serving for them, right? The Fremen, of course, are completely, they live in a kind of, this is they're Berbers. And everybody, everybody's like equal and all this stuff, and that's whatever. But they also, everything they do is for sacrificing themselves for everyone else, and they sort of have that imbued within them. Real John Connor pointed out to me that the Iraqians are sort of the closest thing to a Christian civilization, a Christian society that in Dune world, and I thought that was interesting. So here's the worm riding. Okay, so when they get to the worm riding, what you learn is that we see Stilgar, and he's riding the worm. Okay, he's like surfing on this worm. Yeah, the Yik Yak Tallywhack. Shouts out to JW for that $10. Yeah, they are the Yik Yak Tallywhack. The yik yak tallywhack give the frog a bone. His old man's a rolling stone. So Paul's like, man, I want to learn how to do that. And they're like, you can't do that. You can't do that unless you're Neo. And he's like, I think I can fucking do it. So they teach him that what you got to do is you got to put the thumping machine in the sand, and then you go out there with these grappling hooks, okay? And when the thing rides by, you're gonna jump on the scales, right? Because he's got to ride the snake, like Jim Morrison said. He's got to ride the snake. He's 7 miles long. He holds the history of the world in his scales, and then it turns into like these long rope ski poles, and you're gonna ride the snake. That's how they cover great distances. But to contrast with that, I literally, when I was watching the movie, I thought to myself, because Paul knows the desert dance, he knows how to cross the desert without bringing in the wrath of the worms, okay? Because he's got to mimic the sound of the wind blowing over the sand. But when he's with Zendaya and there's a scene where he's talking to her and she says, okay, let me teach you some things about Arrakis. And it's funny because he's looking in her eyes, and I thought, okay, well, it's like he wanted to say, like, yeah, girl, like, I already know all this stuff. I'm a pretty smart guy, and I read the Wikipedia page. But he's listening to her, and she's telling him all about the water and all this stuff. And then she shows him the desert dance again in the second one. And what was really beautiful, this was very beautiful, is that the two of them, this is when they fell in love. The two of them are doing a simultaneous desert dance. And I thought, man, this is good. I like this. I like the love story. I really like the love story in this. It was true. And it was two young people brought together through circumstance and prophecy, I guess, and I believed that they were in love in this. She gets a little scowly in this. She gets a little scowly. There were times when I thought, it was a little weird. And Dave Petricari says, but they also they worship the worms as their true god. And of course, I know that in the God Worm Emperor book or whatever, because I watched Children of Dune, I know that Leto the Second, who is the grandson of Paul, is going to be the real Yik Yak Tallywhack, and he's going to merge with the worm, and he's going to become the God Worm, which says to me that. Okay, I'm wondering in this, like, because the worm is a Leviathan, and the Leviathan is Satan, right? Is a satanic archetype. So what does that mean? But I guess in the life of Dune, it becomes messianic, I suppose. And it's there's a lot to this. I'm still kind of I'm figuring this out in real time, you guys, right? But that being said. The worm is interesting because the worm is both a creator and a destroyer in this, because the worms. Okay, so yeah, Travis says the Fremen believe that the sandworms do God's bidding. It's not actually God, but it does God's bidding. Okay, all right. So the worm breaks up the sand and the soil. I mean, we're all worms, right? In a sense, we're all worms. And they, by doing that on the planet, they consume the sand, and then the byproduct is that they create spice, right? And the spice is on the surface of the planet. Now, the spice is supposed to be, for our world, I guess you could see the allegory of the oil. The oil is the blood of the earth. And it helps the earth to, it's an organic form, and it moves because of it's lubricated because of the oil, and they're trying to extract the oil and the earth, and the oil makes everything run on the surface. The people, countries become addicted to oil in terms of how industry works. But in this, it becomes a narcotic, right, into how everything works, and it facilitates space travel. One thing I forgot to mention this that I learned was that the Highliners and the Navigators work because they learned that it's something about the Heisenberg principle, and like they learned that the way that they travel through time is that they don't have to go faster than the speed of light to do it, because technically they're not moving. So they learned some sort of space folding technology where the ship isn't moving. It goes into that little portal looking thing, and it comes out the other side on the other side of the galaxy, but the thing isn't moving. So it's kind of like Event Horizon, right? The way that the magnetic energy works or whatever, and they walk into the portal. Of course, in Event Horizon, if you walk into the portal, you go on the other side and it's hell. Right, going through they create a black hole and they end up in hell. But okay, so anyway, so when Paul has to learn to ride on the worm, they're afraid of the worms, but they also merge with the worm in a way, and this shows their superiority on Arrakis because they're at one with nature, right? So I thought this moment would be. I was kind of afraid of this moment. I was like, okay, look, movie's been great so far, but I'm afraid that when he rides this worm, it's gonna lose it. I was afraid it was gonna be either cheesy or dumb, or too overexcitable or whatever it was. But here's what happens. So he goes up on this dune, and the doubters, the haters, they're like, yeah, Paul, why don't you call out the biggest worm, right? And Stilgar looks at him and he's like, it's serious. This is fucking serious. He doesn't say that, but he's like, this is serious. And when he goes up there and he puts in the thumping machine, they can see the dust rising in the distance, and it's like, oh, there's like Everest K2 size mountain ranges of sand moving, and Stilgar's like, oh no, they called the grandfather worm. And there's this big ass worm. It's the worm. And he's like, oh man, our boy's fucked. Excuse my language. So Paul goes up on the top of this thing, and it's funny because Zendaya's down there, and she's like, go higher. You got to set it higher. And he kind of hears that. His psychic mind is sort of opening up. They're in tune with one another. And he puts his thing in, and the worm comes, and he jumps on this worm, and he grapples it, and, he's having a hard time, and then he's riding the worm. Dude, I was like, hell yes, dude. I was like, we're worm surfing. I was so excited in this scene. I can't tell you how excited I was in this scene. And this really made the movie for me, because as skeptical as I am of movies, I was skeptical of the movie. I didn't even want to know if I wanted to talk about the movie when I was walking in, because the problem is that all reviewers of movies beforehand, most reviewers, except for this, I don't trust them. I don't trust them for obvious reasons. Number one, they do the bidding of the studios, right? Or they are furthering something cultural. Or when they're reviewing books, they haven't read the book. They read an excerpt of the book, right? Or if they're reviewing the movie, they haven't watched the whole movie. They've only watched a segment of the movie. And I was like, I just don't believe this. I think it's going to go south. I don't think this is going to happen. And then when I watched it, I was like, yep, I was wrong. I was wrong about this. We can be wrong. We can be wrong all the time about shit, right? We can be wrong and admit we're wrong. And I walked to this, and I realized I was wrong. I was watching, and I was like, nope, I get it. I understand why people are so into this book. I understand why people love this series, and I understand why everybody wants to be a Dooner. This is so fucking cool, dude. This is so cool. I've been waiting for something cool, man. I've been waiting for a movie that I just think that when people talk about movie magic, it's become that's like derogatory now. That's something that's bullshit. The movies have fucked with us so much. Where there's so much bullshit. There's so many decaying messages in movies, right? So I found it. I was elated watching this movie. I thought this is true. This is a real movie. When they talk about movie magic, this is it. I'm watching this in real time. This is it. I was excited by this. It was original. I thought a lot of times when they make movies, they go, okay, we're going to let you make this movie, and the studio interferes, and it's all that stuff. We only get very specific examples of where they give someone artistic freedom, and they go through with it, and it succeeds. Because a lot of times it doesn't succeed. Like with the guy who made The Island of Dr. Moreau, they fired him, right? Because it was too out there, right? And with Francis Ford Coppola, with Apocalypse Now, it's like the studio got pissed, and They were going to pull the whole movie, and he's going too far out there. But then he went ahead with it, and he finances it himself, and he loses all this money. But he made something pure. He made an actual work of art. He went all the way through. He went all the way to the end, right? He risks everything, and I believe that about Apocalypse Now. He risks everything, and he brings his family out there, and he's spending all this money, and the thing gets destroyed by a typhoon in the middle, and the helicopters are flying, and then they turn around. They got to fight the war in the Philippines. There's like all of that. I believe the lore of Apocalypse Now, all that happened. And in this movie, I thought this movie could go south so easily, but they had a guy who we see prerequisites of this in Arrival and in Blade Runner 2049 and in Sicario, and those are great movies. I really like those movies. Arrival is my least favorite of those, but I see what he was doing in that. It's like, Arrival I thought was like, okay, well, here we go. One world government and Gnostic egg and, the past is the present and the future and we're all one. Okay, all that shit. But this one I thought was different, and the guy went all the way through with it. And he went all the way to the end, and everything in it is good. There's no bullshit. And the worm thing was like, I just thought it was so cool, man. I just thought it was so cool. One of the reasons I thought it was cool was because they say acting is reacting. That's not really true. Acting is listening. That's not reacting. Acting is listening, right? And it's funny because in our world, in the world we live in, you may notice this. The next time you talk to someone, especially at work, notice that when you talk to them, how much of a time crunch there is. You may feel a sense of anxiety, wondering if you can get 3 words out. That's time. There's never enough time. Everybody's always distracted. That's because of infinite scroll, digital world. It's not with everyone, but just notice that. I'm highly aware of that. We all have had somebody that we talk to where, oh no, this guy's going to corner me. He's going to talk to me for like 10 hours. There's always that. But if you're the one talking, right, you probably are aware that you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the guy who gets the guy for 10 hours. When I'm talking to people, I can go on, but I try to give people an out. I give people an out because I don't want to capture anyone to talk to them. But just notice that when you talk to somebody, especially someone in charge, like at work, notice that when you talk to them, if you're talking to someone, you go, hey, and they go like this, hey, how's it going? Yep. And they start looking off like, oh, I got something else better to do. Oh, hold on. Somebody else just walked up to me and I have to. It's like when you go into a business and you're talking to them like at the desk or whatever, and then they get a phone call and they answer the phone call. Hold on one second. Yes? Right? That's the world we live in, right? No. I'm here now. If you don't answer the phone, they're not going to even know that you were there, right? But I'm here and I know, and now you've left. So in this, I thought everything that they did was in the moment, and Javier Bardem reacts, he listens in this great, because you'll notice that the worm surfing scene, it cuts to scenes of him reacting, and it was like everything they showed with him became a meme in the sense that like he had the perfect reaction. He's like looking at him and he's like, yes, and I thought this was dudes being dudes. This was the fellas are supporting each other. It's like when you watch somebody who's really good at something and you love it. Man, you can show me a clip of the ping pong match or the girls volleyball match or the son, the dad is showing his first grader at the t-ball game, and if he knocks it out of the park or if it's a long rally, I get excited by that. I get excited that life is fiery with its beauty, right? That we should be excited and lift each other up. When your friend like sells his house or started his own business or something. I don't know anything about any of that, but I'm excited by it. I'm excited because they did it. They had a goal and they did it. They won, right? We got to win. We have to win these things. And sometimes we win in losing. You lose, and that brings you a sense of peace. because it's in God's providence. I think that, I don't know. I just watched this movie and I thought this was just so fucking cool, dude. When he was riding that worm, I thought, man, this is so cool. This is so cool. I didn't even like Timothée Chalamet. I thought he was going to be a typical wispy, willowy zoomer, right? And then I realized, watching the movie, that he's the perfect casting for this because, first of all, he was supposed to be born a girl, right? They expected the witch mother to have a girl, but it's Paul. But then she's also pregnant and she has Aaliyah. So that's Anya Taylor-Joy. So that's the girl. And then she, I guess, she's going to have a child, and that's going to be Leto, the second. And that's going to be the worm dude. Okay, but it makes sense that he's he kind of looks weak. But it also makes sense that he's skinny and stuff because they're out on this sand world, and there's nothing to eat. There's no food. They're eating locusts and honey, right? Of course he's skinny, right? And he wasn't like annoyingly emotional. He was kind of gothy looking, but again, that's for a purpose. Everything had a purpose. And I gotta say, man, he really was good in this movie. Like, he was really fucking good. I like him a lot. He's the next guy. He's the next Leo. He's the next. I mean, that for Hollywood. He's the next dude. He's versatile. He's got a range. He's got a. There was one particular scene where this really also was a key moment in the movie, where oftentimes when I'm watching movies, I'm looking at people's faces and looking at their eyes. I've told you this, especially when in a movie like this we get tight close-ups. So it's annoying to me how movies focus on tight close-ups to the extent that they do for no reason. But in this one, when you're watching him, you notice that he and Zendaya are in love, and at some point it kind of changes. She's worried that he's a spy, and then she's worried that he's not who he says he is. Then she's worried that he's not who he says he is for a reason, right? And then maybe he doesn't even know who he is. So she starts to get worried, and she kind of starts to scowl, and we're looking in her eyes, and at that point I thought, she's kind of weak in this, right? But then when I looked at him, something happened. There's a scene when I was watching him, and it was a tight close up on his face, and it was like I saw in his face. I think that this is purposeful. This is what great actors do. I saw him go from young Paul Atreides to the man Atreides in his face on the screen in about 30 seconds, and that's not something that. I don't think that I just saw that. I think that's something that was intended. It wasn't special effect. People don't know what I'm talking about. I said this to a few other people. They didn't know what I'm talking about. They said, well, it was the special effect. I'm like, there's no special effects in this scene. It wasn't special effects. There was no AI. There's no CGI. This was just his face. And I think what happened was the interior mind of the actor can transform the face in a way where we can move through time. We see one person doing something totally different, and it's not an overt thing. It's not just in his eyes. It's not something he realized. But I watched him go from the child character that goes to Arrakis to the man that he's gonna be when he walks into the sitch at the end, and I saw that happen on his face, and I believed that. I thought that was fantastic. I don't know where it is in the movie. I don't know how to point it out. I'd have to see the movie again. But it was obvious to me when I watched it. Not obvious it obviously happened, but when I saw this, it stood out to me. Somebody brought up Harry Potter. This is crazy because you notice that Hollywood moves in phases. They move in sort of eons, I suppose. And we have a shift in the way that culture is shown to us in movies. For such a young art, Hollywood and movie making has done a lot. I mean, painting and writing and sculpting are all things that are they're old. Those are old things, right? Movie making is not. It's young. Relied on new technology, and it's really only come so far. So in the future, it will be something totally different. But I think that I've talked about high concepts and Don Simpson in the 80s and how they revolutionized Hollywood from the 70s. The 70s had an emphasis on auteur cinema and ethnic actors that looked gritty. They looked more real in terms of they looked urban, gritty, and real. Um, it was no longer the sort of post-war 60s in terms of music, in terms of movies or the themes. But this Hollywood changed, and then we in the 80s we got something that was more patriotic, more. It became bigger, more action oriented, more money, and all those things. And then in the 90s, again, things changed. We started to get CGI, and then we have movie franchises that are built into this. So we had Lord of the Rings, and Lord of the Rings sort of ruled as a trilogy, kind of taking over from Star Wars. Star Wars is inherently child. It's built into a child audience. George Lucas. I watched a George Lucas interview, and George Lucas. They said, "How did you even create Star Wars? Like, what? Why did you write it the way that you did?" And he essentially said that he just took Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and the archetypes, and he made them as wide ranging as possible, so that children would be able to grasp onto these things. I thought that was an interesting thing. They asked him about technology and how he created Industrial Light and Magic and all those things. And George Lucas said, well, movie making is not about like technology. He says that necessity is the mother of invention. Essentially, I had a thing that I wanted to film, and I wasn't able to film it in that way because it didn't exist yet. So I invented the thing that would allow me to do that. Kind of like with Steadicam or any of these things. So I thought that was interesting. But we also have these franchises, like we have the Vampire Story. The Vampire Story, and Twilight and everything vampirical in the 2000s and 2000 teens. And eventually that got taken over by Marvel, of course. Sort of midway through, Marvel takes over and it becomes something bigger, which is older but also younger. It's for children, but adults latch onto it, and it becomes eventually an infantilizing agent where grown-ups are watching movies that they sometimes don't realize that they like because they appeal to their youth. So they think that they are watching the hero's journey and the thing that will allow them to live a full life, but actually it's kind of going backwards. There's no forward march in that. There's no kind of spiritual wholeness when watching a Marvel movie. And then it becomes funny and self-aware that it's joking, which works with a buddy action movie. Like when you're watching Lethal Weapon, it becomes funny, right? They're aware that they're living lives in the movie, and not everything can be serious. So we have to like them, so there's a charisma. But in the Marvel movies, it doesn't work like. Imagine watching Ant-Man 3, right? Can you imagine sitting down and watching that right now? I mean, come on, man. I mean, I feel kind of fucking angry about that. I feel angry that that even comes into my mental feed. Get the fuck out of here with that. It's not that I don't like. It's not that I'm mad that it exists. And it's like kids can like that stuff. And I like some of the people that are involved in it. That's fine or whatever. People are working. They're making movies. But I don't like that I have to think about that. I don't like that even comes across my mental zone. That makes me mad. Makes me mad to think that that's what it is. Okay? And again, I'm not mad at, I liked Iron Man 1. I like the second one because it's got Mickey Rourke in it. I like, Iron Man 3 is good because it's it's revelatory about fake flags and all that stuff. I like, it's got that in it, and it's revelatory for the things that happen in geopolitics. I think that's interesting. But to keep going with this shit, you know what I really get mad about? Here's who I really get mad about. I really get mad about Chris Hemsworth. That's who pisses me off. That pisses me off. Chris Hemsworth pisses me the fuck off. Okay? Excuse my language. But I get mad that this dude is in these movies. Why? Yeah, Winter Soldier's tight, man. Winter Soldier's tight because even though it's Captain America, even though it's all that stuff, the Winter Soldier's a real thing. There's an MK Delta that's a real thing. So I see revelatory elements of that. I like Viking lore and I like runes. And my book of poems is called Runes. But this is a space Viking, and Chris Hemsworth is not good. I like that there's a Chad out there. I like that Australian Chad is making a movie. Okay, but he can't act. He can't. He's funny. He's charismatic. People like him. You like watching him. But at some point, I just went, get this fucking guy out of my face, man. I'm tired of this shit. Right? Like, get this guy to be in a real movie. Kind of like, it's, you know what? It's like Jason Momoa. It's like Merman. They make this dude Merman? Are you kidding me? I'd be like, you want me to play Merman? Get the fuck out of here. Haven't you seen Zoolander? Merman pops. Merman, get out of here. Look, man, I like Waterworld. I like Waterworld, and it's got Kevin Costner because he's the mariner and because he can breathe underwater. I think that's cool. I imagine breathing underwater. That's cool. Okay, but I don't like Merman. I didn't even see those movies. I didn't even think about seeing those movies. But Jason Momoa redeemed himself to me because of who he plays in this. Because he is a selfless warrior man knight. That's cool to me. That's archetypal. It's true to form, and it was noble. I thought that was cool. And he was. Remember the scene in the first one where he's like, seems like you built some muscle. And Paul's like, I have? And he's like, no. That's cool. Right? That's cool. Yeah. That's cool, man. I like that. Yeah, Waterworld has Dennis Hopper. You telling me the world's turned into a bunch of piss-drinking freaks? That's Waterworld. Right, I think Waterworld's pretty fun. But anyway, man. Yeah, I didn't like that. But anyway, when he was riding that worm, I thought that was cool. He was worm surfing, and we see the John the Baptist character who is elated. He is excited, man. He thinks that he thinks this is the return of the Muad'Dib or whatever in their world, and he believes it. And he believes it, man. He believes it, and that is life affirming. It means there's more than just this desert world, and that there's the life of his spirit is shining. Just like the spice shines in the low sun, in the shimmering dune. That's the way that his blood feels in his veins, And I thought that was really cool. They have the war. They all go to war, and this is gonna usher in the holy war. What do you call that? The Butlerian Jihad. Is that what you call it? Is that the holy war? Somebody tell me in the chat. I don't know. But it's going to usher in the holy war because they go to war against the Harkonnen. Thank you, Chrislyn. And they ride the worms to do this. They sleep in the sand. They ride the worms. And the Emperor has come to Arrakis to figure out what the hell's going on. And that's Christopher Walken. Give me this watch. Bought it in an old coffee can. Paul Atreides came to the world. You, my daughter. Oh, his daughter's a witch too, right? Remember his daughter in this movie was also, she was in Midsommar, right? She's a Midsommar witch. We got another damn witch. She didn't really do much in the movie except for, do a verbal diary, right? But we know when we see her that she's going to end up being the wife of Paul Atreides, right? Zendaya's going to say, Paul Atreides. I knew that when I watched it. I don't even know anything about this. Because he said in the first movie and when he first met her that everything he does is for the blood, it's for the bloodline, it's for his family, it's for the Atreides. He's got to fulfill what his dad gave him. So I knew that because he's an outsider to the Iraqians, right? He's an outsider the whole time. That eventually there will come a scene where he's confronted with the new marriage, and that Zendaya will become the outsider because she's the outsider to the royal family into that whole situation. Now I don't know what happens after this. I think I think that okay. I think from Children of Dune, is this what happens that Zendaya and Paul they must get married, right? Because then they have a child, and that child. Hold on. So is Leto? Okay, wait a minute. So who are the twins are Leto and his sister because it's like Apollo Artemis. Leto the second, he's got to be the real guy because he's a native Iraqian because his mother or his grandmother is Zendaya, right? So that's who the guy really has to be. So okay, so that makes sense. Zendaya will become Zendaya will become the real wife of Paul Atreides. Does that happen? Does that happen after this? Somebody tell me. I'm not a full on Dooner here. I don't know this stuff. But whatever happens in this movie, she's out. Okay? And they win the war in the movie, and they end up at the doors and they start knocking on the doors just like the knocking of the thump, thump, thump that brings the worm. So now they have brought the embodiment of the sandworm that's Paul. He's not the Leto the Second Emperor Godworm yet. He's not going to be. That's going to be Leto the Second, I guess. But he walks in the door just like they bring on the thumping of the worm, right? And he walks in through the door. He walks up and he sees Christopher Walken. And he demands that Christopher Walken bow to him and that he become the new emperor. Okay, and the reason he did that, I learned, is because in the first movie, the reason that the Atreides are given the world of Arrakis is because, God, there's so much in this, is because Dave Bautista says, how could you just give it to them? He spazzes, right? Shouts out to Hesher right there. Yo, shouts out to Hesher for that $20. He says, the most Bazed of all lit analyzers. Keep up the great work, homie. Thank you so much, Hesher. Really appreciate you, homeboy. He freaks out, and Stellan Skarsgård, Harkonnen, who's it's funny that he's Vladimir Harkonnen. Of course. You know, people were watching this and they were like, it's so obvious. He's Putin. He's obviously Vladimir Putin. Well, wasn't the book written a long time ago? Excuse my language. But it is funny. But he's sitting there and he goes, when is a gift not a gift? And Dave Bautista goes, oh, no, man. Why don't you explain that to me? Right. Well, the Emperor sold out the Atreides because they are becoming too powerful or whatever, even though the Harkonnens have unimaginable wealth. So he gives them, he sends them to Arrakis to die, essentially. He sends them there. He sells them out. The Emperor does a color revolution on Arrakis, and then he brings in the Harkonnen in a sneak attack. The sneak attack wipes out the Atreides. They're all gone, and they're going to take over. And then the Emperor is complete in his power, I guess. What's funny, because we see scenes of the Emperor playing pyramid chess with his daughter or granddaughter or whatever she is back on home planet Emperorville. Back on home planet Zidon or whatever. And it's very Edenic, right? So the Emperor lives in the perfect harmony with nature. But it's Christopher Walken, and he gets there, and he's like, Paul betrayed these. And so he wants to become the new emperor. Now, he hands it over, and Paul's going to become, I guess Paul becomes a new emperor. Is that right? But the other planets who are now brought to Arrakis, everybody's centered on Arrakis because the whole universe is centered on Arrakis. The Imperium cannot exist without spice. And they don't like the ascension of Paul as the new emperor. They see this as illegitimate. They didn't like the voting process. They see this as illegitimate. And this is going to usher in the Holy War, right, where the Iraqians go out and they wipe out everybody. And that's why Paul is afraid in his visions, because he sees trillions of people dead across the galaxy. Okay, but he has to unite his family with the Emperor's family. That's why he's going to marry Midsommar Girl. Okay, and now Zendaya gets pissed about this because she's like, what about me? What about all this stuff? And he's like, you've been scowling for too long. Half the movie you were scowling at me. Maybe you shouldn't have been such a scowler. Okay, but he's like, I'll always love you. Okay, but in the meantime, we have Austin Butler, who plays Moth Rotha, or whatever his name is. And he challenges Paul after the war's over. He challenges Paul to a duel. Now, this has been foreshadowed because we saw in the first movie, we saw Paul fighting with, what's his name? Sean Kingston? No, Josh Brolin. We see him. Why do I always want to call him that? We see him fighting with John Brolin. Okay. And he says, maybe I'm not in the mood today. Mood? Right? And he fought him. He taught him how to duel. Now, we see the complete education of Paul as a king because we see his mental education. We see his like witch education, his psychic education. We see him looking at the muskrats. We see him fighting. We see all this stuff. So we know he's ready. So he's gonna fight. He's gonna fight with Austin Butler, and Austin Butler went through his education because he was fighting in that gladiator match with those little snip those guys, right? So he challenges him to a duel. Now this part I thought was one of the weak points. Okay, I laughed out loud when I saw this. So Paul, when they're about to fight, he says, "May thy knife chip." He says, "Like may thy knife chip and shatter." Right, and he does that, and then. I thought Moth Rotha like didn't have anything to say here, and he goes, may thy knife chip and shatter. Like, nah, dude, you got to come up with a better comeback than that. That's not cool. But they fought and they dueled, and spoiler alert, smokes him, and he did, and now he doesn't have anything to worry about. And then of course, what happens? Paul goes up and he walks up those steps or whatever, and he snip. He puts that worm tooth knife right into Vladimir Harkonnen's jugular, and he is smoked right there on the steps. So now Paul can ascend the steps to power. Now, I know this is different from the books. I haven't read the books, but again, I know it's different from the books because I know from David Lynch Dune, which I do not like, that Aaliyah, who is a baby, is the one who kills her granddad. No, that would be her great granddad. No, her granddad, because she got the blue eyes and she's dressed like a Bene Gesserit, and she's like, hey, "I'm going to get your grandfather." Right. So I know that the baby kills him in that one, but they changed it for this, and that's fine. In fact, I don't really care. I don't care because I don't know it, and also because. Once you gain the rights to the work of art and you make the movie of it, it's yours. You can do that. And you can't fit the whole damn thing into the movies. Like, they made 2 movies of the first book, I guess. But, like, there's so damn much. There's so much in this. How am I supposed to remember all these words, man? There's a lot of shit, but I want to. It's really cool. Right, yes, he smote him upon the mountainside. Right? So he kills Harkonnen. And now the Harkonnens are dead. They're gone. And now we got the Atreides. So there got to be another villain, right? But the point is that Paul completes his Galahad mission here because, he's not Galahad, but in the Grail, right? Because there's a certain sort of Grail, archetypal Grail lore mixed in with this. We have we take a series of journeys here, and it's obviously Christian allegorical. We get a kid who's born. We get his mother. Rebecca Ferguson, the witch mother, is not a Mary figure. To me, she was more of a Sophia character. I mean, isn't she that by definition? She's Sophia, right? She receives the wisdom from the blue juice and all that stuff. She's a witch. But the Gnostic element's kind of, it doesn't really go with that. Like the prison planet. I mean, and the break on through to the other side. They do. I guess it is Gnostic in many ways. Like I know that they gotta find the golden path. There's a scene with Paul, and he's like, there's great hand acting in this, by the way. There's a scene with Paul, and he's like, I can see all the worlds, and through the worlds, I see a golden path. And he does this with his hand, and it focuses on his hand. I thought, damn, that's good. That one little motion, I thought it was really cool. I believed him. And it's also, I've seen reviews where people said, oh, it's just like Doctor Strange and the multiverse. And I said, get the out of here, you silly Billy. This ain't no Doctor Strange. It's not. This isn't the multiverse where the worlds are going to be created and there are multiple dimensions of worlds. This is Paul having OCD times infinity. he can see possibilities of possibilities. And in all those possibilities, he sees the shining path that's going to take him to the crystal city of illumination. And the crystal city of illumination becomes the incarnation of the Emperor Godworm, who's going to rule over this place. But that is Gnostic. I mean, the Leviathan and the Gnosticism, I suppose, is inherent in that. But there's so much, like the planets surrounding Arrakis are Carolingian and Merovingian and the Medici and the Borgias. Like they all have their own planets, right? Gedi Prime is obviously also where they put the clone of Darth Sidious. It's just that. It's just Satan world, right? It's Dark Satan world. And we have European power plays, and we've got to have the ascension of, the one true king here. He's not the king, by the way. I mean, he's not, there's still the king of the universe. Christ, the king of the universe, still rules over all these people watching him. These are human beings. But, they live in a BG, AG world, right, before Guild, after Guild, the Spacing Guild, right, which determines the fate of the galaxy running around. They're all centering around this desert planet full of spice. And again, that's interesting because the blue planet with the water is the center of our universe, right? God made us. We're it. And yet the center of their world is a desert planet. So I think that's an interesting flip. Also, calling the blue juice the water of life is obviously has a Christian element in it. Not the way that they get it, obviously, it's the Drino, but calling it the water of life, I mean, it's revelation, right? The Holy Spirit and the water of life. God is the water of, drink from the water of life. Christ mentions the water of life. So we get this guy, he goes to the desert, he wanders in the desert. They tell him at one point, Stilgar says, beware of the jinn in the desert. We just did a whole stream on the jinn, by the way. Remember? Arabian Nights. He goes out there and he thinks that he sees visions of the jinn, but it's actually Zendaya out there. She comes out there to help him, which kind of brings up, okay, well, is Zendaya one of the jinn? I mean, is this devil woman going to bring him down? No, she's there to help him and teach him stuff. And, but it also becomes like he's out there and he's supposed to face temptation in the desert. He dies. In a sense, he dies and is resurrected, right? Because he drinks the blue juice and he's dead, but then he rises back to life and he lives. He performs a series of Iraqian miracles. He rides the worm and all this stuff. He returns after the DMT blue juice journey with a sword. He's got a dagger in his hand. And he leads them. He's standing on the promontory, and he leads them to war, to holy war. So there are a lot of elements in this, and I thought that was great. Yeah, that's right. Thomas Henderson, the temptations of the Messiah, yet angels minister to him. So there's a lot in this. That's right. Yes, Chrislin says it's not enough to love Christ. You must also hate evil. Well, I thought the big twist for me was when yes, does he ride the giant worm? Hell yes, he does. Yes, he rides the giant worm. And what's the giant worm's name, you guys? He's got a name. Somebody tell me in the chat. Somebody put it earlier. I don't remember the worm's name. But this is the big grandfather worm. He's a big old ancient primordial worm. And also, again, I found it interesting that Rebecca Ferguson sees into the deep. The deep is supposed to be, right, dreams are messages from the deep. So this is from the first one. What this means is that the deep is a sense of deep time. They are space traveling. They're going into the outer edges of the universe, but they can Shai Hulud, that's it. They have a small world that's a big world that's brought small through space travel. There's the deep of the navigators absorbed, ensconced in spice juice forever. That's how they live. There's the deep of dreaming itself, a deep mind. They can communicate through distances with a psychic mind. And also, there's the deep of the planet Arrakis itself, where the worms live. There's the deep of the ocean world that it's going to become. And there's the psychic mind, spiritual depth of accessing all of the memories of all time that Leto the Second is supposed to have. And that Paul accesses in the sense where he's standing there and it's the deep crowd and he can tell everybody's memories and what they're thinking at the same time. He knows all of them. So I found this, he's clairvoyant. He can see the future. He sees, I forgot to mention the atomics. So Josh Brolin is interesting because he's probably one of the weaker characters in this. Not characters, but Brolin himself. I like Josh Brolin a lot. I saw an interview with Josh Brolin where he was talking about his first big paycheck. He was kind of stagnant for a long time in Hollywood. He wasn't getting roles. He was in Goonies way back. His dad's James Brolin, but I guess he was just because your family got money doesn't mean you have to, right? And he was kind of stagnating in Hollywood, not doing anything, and then all of a sudden he was in American Gangster. No, he was in No Country for Old Men, which we covered, and he got a small paycheck for that, even though that was the start of his arc. And then he was an American Gangster, and he said he got a check, and the check had he thought it was a check for $60,000, and he thought it was great. He hadn't ever seen that much money before, and then he realized there were a couple extra zeros tacked onto that from the residuals from the movie, and then he realized his whole life had changed overnight because of this movie. And I thought that was cool the way he talked about it. Whenever I hear Josh Brolin talk, he seems like a regular dude. I don't know, but he seems like a regular dude that I like, and I like him in all the movies. This one was interesting because here's my take on Josh Brolin. I imagine that they cast all of these characters. Josh Brolin is in he's in a lot of the Denis Villeneuve movies. He's in his kind of stable of actors in his company, and I imagine that then when they called up Josh Brolin to see if he wanted to be in this movie, his reaction probably was something like, "Dude, I don't know what the fuck that is, man. I don't know what Dune is, but I'm here for it." Like, just positive. So they put him in the first movie, and he's good, and he trains him, and he's like, "They're brutal." That line was kind of weak. But then in this movie, they bring him back because he survived the war, and he's like, "I don't know, man. I've just been out here in this fucking desert. I mean, what do you think, right? Let's go look at the atomics." I thought he didn't really fit. His sort of attitude didn't really fit the rest of the movie. I like what I was saying about Javier Bardem. I could see everything sort of the opposite with Josh Brolin. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing here, But you know what? He's here for it, and that's pretty cool. Whatever. So I didn't believe him in the movie. Let's just say it like that. But I do like him. But Josh Brolin at one point says, "Look, man, you got all this stuff going, Paul, and I trained you and everything, but let's go look at the atomics." Well, what are the atomics? The atomics are the relics of the old world that are nuclear weapons. And they are hard line, what's the word? Intercontinental ballistic missiles. So he says, "I'm going to show you where they are. They're right in that cave over there. They're right in another Plato's cave." And Javier Bardem says, "How could they be right there?" And he's like, "That's where they are. Right? They're in the one place nobody would ever look, which is right in front of you. They're hiding in plain sight." So they access the thing. He's got the secret code, right? He dials in the code, big 9420, right? They go into the thing, and they see all of the Saturn V, Werner von Braun, intercontinental ballistic missiles standing up in rows like cathedral lights. And he's like, "If all else fails, we can just blow the fuck out of everything." So Paul uses these. He launches nuclear missiles I think he launches 3 at the Harkonnen. And that's the initial assault as part of the Blitz. And he even, part of his bargaining chip with the Emperor is he says, "Look, if you don't make me Emperor, I'm going to blow this bitch up. I'm going to blow up everything, and then there won't be any spice," which is very much against the way that he's presented himself before. He's part of the frame, and they initiate him into their world. He's part of them now, but he's still an outsider, right? Even though he's technically part of them, he's not blood related. He's not part of them. That's why Leto II has to come along. Right. So what's the time frame in Dune? It's set in the year 10,000 AG, I think. So it's far, far in the future. Remember when Jay did his whole timeline of dystopian movies? Right. I think Dune was in there. He covered Dune. Like Dune is the furthest one in the future. Of course, actually, yeah, it's got to be Dune because even Time Machine is set in the year like 800,000 AD. But I guess this is even further than that. It's very far in the future. Something like that. I don't know. Far enough where, there's been a war against AI. There's been Skynet. Skynet took over. There was a total war. They won, but they have banned computers. That's why they have the Mentats, because Mentats are all human computers. So even the Bene Gesserit used genetic modification in terms of bringing about the Yitzhak's cataract, give a dog a bone. Right. They got to make sure. So part of that is that the witch woman, Charlotte Rampling, put your hand in the box. Beside you, she goes, put your hand in the box. No, not your left hand, your right hand, right? He puts his hand in the box. What's in the fucking box? Put your hand in the box. Pain. She puts his hand in the box. Up to your neck. You will see I have the Zygote Shamananhun. It is instant poison death. If you move, you will die, right? So he sees pain. We hear high-frequency noises. He sees pain. But what we learned about that in Dune 1 is that it's an initiatory rite similar to, it's essentially like a Masonic rite, right? He has to go through the final step in order to prove that he's the one, because if he's not the one, then he will flinch and she'll kill him with the Zygote or whatever. Okay. But we also learn that that is a blackmail operation, right? She is learning his deepest fears, so now they can access his deep mind, so they can know his deepest fears, so they can compromise him if need be. That's why the witch goes off and does the same thing with Moth Ratha. Now, we didn't see the end result of that, but we assume, he's passed. She probably had him put his hand in the box, and he was like, put your hand in the box. And he's like, what's in it? And she's like, pain. And he's like, far out. I love pain. Right? And she's like, all right, no need, freak. This box doesn't even apply to you anymore, I guess. Well, at the end of the movie, fear is the mind killer. Also, notice that Paul, even after she says, all right, that's enough, he keeps his hand in the box. It takes him like a good few seconds to pull his hand out. Like, oh, this is the guy. Because he doesn't mind it. Fear is the mind killer. He takes his mom's mantra and he learns that, right? Well, at the end of the movie, probably the most revelatory line in the movie, as far as we're concerned, is when Rebecca Ferguson said, I think it's Rebecca Ferguson, his mom, says something to her about, you chose the wrong side. And the witch mother, the Bene Gesserit lady, says, don't you understand by now, dear girl, there are no sides? That's the movie. That's revelatory. That's us. So, of course, the ruling powers of the elite have no sides. There are a series of moves on a grand chessboard, right? And the power plays of the elites against one another, but they are all synthetic and pop up at times for the focus of energy and various things that they want, which will allow them to power play. But regardless of all that, the Bene Gesserit have infiltrated themselves into all of these places. That's why when they get to the planet and they learn about that the Muad'Dib are talking, one of the characters says, oh, the Bene Gesserit have been at work here. They've been on their satanic missionary mission trying to influence the fundamentalists to tell them this is coming. And that's what Rebecca Ferguson does throughout the second movie. She's off trying to evangelize for her son, right? So regardless of whether he believes he is the Muad'Dib or not, and I don't know, does he? I guess I ought to know watching the movie or not, but man, I don't know. God, there's so much in this that I don't know. Whatever happens, the important thing for us, I guess, is that the people in charge, the people running this, their dark spirit, has no sides and they use everyone, and that the little people are the ones who are forced into corners, right? But of course, the little people are the ones who are focusing on their true religion, I suppose, and that's what the Iraqians are doing. So, yeah, Melly says, what did you say? Faith moves mountains. Oh, that's important for this. Yeah, faith moves mountains because Paul, of course, watches the mountains moving. Of course, it's Mohammedan as well, right? You can't bring the mountain to you, so you go to the mountain or whatever. Bring the mountain to you. I don't remember. But he brings the mountain to him, and he moves the mountains because the mountains are made of the movements of the shifting sands under the sandworms or over the sandworms. So the sandworm itself is a mountain, and it's, again, holds the history of the world on its scales. Shai Halud, right? The language in this is so cool. I really like the language. It's I did watch a thing on Frank Herbert and how he came up with this, and I found this interesting. There's like a 5-hour interview with him that I haven't gotten through, but just in the first little bit of it, he's being interviewed by some guy, and he's in like Oregon, and the interviewer, I think, is a professor or a creative writing professor or something like that. And he's like, okay, we're here with Frank Herbert. We're going to talk about his novel Dune. This was from the interview's from 1965. And he says, basically, how did you come up with this? And it's interesting. He said, well, I didn't come up with it the way other people come up with their epics. It's not J.R.R. Tolkien and World War I and studying Beowulf and, Anglo-Saxon. Lord of the Rings is obviously expressly Anglo-Saxon. There's some Anglo-Saxon elements in this as far as the language is concerned. The elimination of articles before nouns and epithets and kennings are in this a bit. But what's really interesting about Frank Herbert is he said, well, I actually came up with this by studying sand dunes. He said he was studying the ecology of sand dunes, and yes, Thomas Anderson, natural governance is monarchy and family. I agree. Absolutely, I agree. And he was studying the ecology of sand dunes, and he was interested in their movements, and eventually what he came to realize was that the people who exist around the dune, and he studied a number of dunes, are different from, let's say, the organic flora and fauna of the rest of the world. There's a huge difference in how people develop around these things and the mystical nature of sand dunes. And that brought to mind while I was watching this that, when Paul and Zendaya are doing their dune dance across the desert and they're walking in unison, I looked at the sand, and there's a view of the sand, and I thought, is this how Arabic writing came about? Is this how the writing of Arabic came about? Because the physical form of Anglo-Saxon writing is so far different. The way not only the etymology, but the physical form of letters on a page, even on a page. So runic writing is obviously angular and straight because it has to be carved into a stone. And Arabic writing is fluid and circular, and it looks like people walking in sand. It's very crazy. I honestly, I looked at it, I thought, is this how this came about? I don't know about how the origins of the Arabic letter forms came about. I don't know. But when I was watching it, I thought this is extremely poetic and beautiful. I thought it was really interesting. But anyway, so he talked about how societies form around sand dunes, and the sand dunes are, psychedelic. They're psychedelic in the sense that I haven't been to the Sahara. I haven't been to a big sand dune. I've been to the dunes at OBX. Okay, but that you're not allowed to walk on. But there's like cans of Beast Light all in them and stuff. But he talked about. It's funny because he's talking about the Sahara Desert, and he says the Kalahari Desert, and the guy goes, Kalahari, and he goes, yeah, the Kalahari Desert, and he's like, Kalahari, and Frank Herbert's like, yes. The Kalahari Desert. You never heard of the fucking Kalahari Desert? But anyway, moving on. So the interview was real stupid. But anyway, he's talking about the various sand dunes, on different continents. And he studied these things for a long time. And eventually he came to form a kind of nucleus of a story about this. And he took the hero's journey and he moved it into space, or in the future. And he thought, what will happen uh, with the way the biological world works without humans, and how will humans develop around it in the future? So what if there's a whole planet that's a sand dune, right? What does that mean? And then, of course, you can't help but think that, like, the idea of the psychedelic revolution that was happening in the 50s and 60s didn't influence. So I don't know anything about Frank Herbert. So did that happen? Also, I found it very interesting that he was talking about the ecology of the sand dune, and I'm such a doomer now, but I want to be a dooner, right? But I'm such a doomer that whenever I hear the word ecology now, I always automatically think Human Ecology Fund. So, was Frank Herbert studying something with ecology because of the Human Ecology Fund? Because the Human Ecology Fund was the CIA cutout that funded all the MK Ultra projects. So was this culture creation? Does this have something to do with it? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Did somebody know? Leave that in the comments afterwards if you know, if he had any sort of. I'm not saying Frank Herbert was a CIA agent. I'm saying, was he funded knowingly or unknowingly by this? Does this have something to do with that? I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if he was. But yeah. So there's 6 books. Justin says he tripped on shrooms. That does not surprise me. Because I think that sand dunes are the closest thing to me. This is going to seem like a weird comparison, but the closest thing for sand dunes to me would be the mountain rocks of Switzerland. Because when I went to Switzerland, I spent I was there for I was gone for a month, I think. I got an Interrail pass in my Easter holiday, which is a month long, when I was in Belfast, and I flew into Switzerland, and then I went Switzerland, Austria, Denmark. I walked across Liechtenstein, and then I went to and I ended up in Denmark. I went to Germany, Black Forest, the Schwarzwald. But when I was in Switzerland, I was in Interlaken and Lugano. I went to the Swiss Riviera. I went up to Zermatt, a bunch of places. But when I was walking, I did a great amount of walking. I basically walked everywhere. And the way Switzerland worked for me was like, you're walking along a path. There's a glade. There's an alpine meadow. There's a crystalline stream going beside you, and the mountains begin right there. It's like when you look at mountains in America, it's usually like from like in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. You're driving along. You're on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and you're driving like from Charlottesville or something, and you see the mountains and the Blue Ridge rises in the distance. It seems preternatural and so big, but it's far away. Like you can't just. There's a great amount of, extended elevation, like before you get up to the mountain you're climbing. You've already been going for a long time. But in Switzerland, it seemed to me that the mountain just rises right there. Like God made a meadow and then dropped a mountain right there. And you immediately just climb the mountain straight up. And the rocks are so huge, and there's so much detail in the rocks that when you're walking, I had to try when I was walking to not look at the rocks, because they start to play with your mind. They're so big, you start to see faces in the rocks. You start to see images in them because of the contours. It's so large. And I feel like that's the same thing that happens with sand dunes, because you are completely enveloped in the natural world, and the sand dunes have so much detail in their contours, and the way they change and shift is it's natural to a kind of shifting mind and a psychedelic sort of experience, if that makes sense. Yeah, Natasha says, I'm not hosteling anywhere. I'm not hosteling anywhere now because I'm 43. I think back then the limit to your age limit for staying in a youth hostel was 26. And even then, that seemed really old. I mean, I was 21, so it was fine. Actually, I mostly stayed at youth hostels, and that was cool because sometimes I'd be on a mountain ridge, and I'd come to a youth hostel and it wouldn't even be open. Then I'd have to walk 5 miles to the next one. But there was one. The most beautiful experience I had with a youth hostel was when I was at the lakes in Switzerland. A lot of lakes, but I was around a lake and I got off a boat and I just got off. It was raining and I had my backpack and I just started going up this trail. And then finally I came to a promontory and I was raining. I love it when it rains, by the way. I enjoy rain. I've always liked rain because I find a solace in rain. Most people hate the rain. They hate being wet and they hate being soaked. Maybe it's my, you know, Anglo-Irish blood or something, or the time I spent in Belfast, where it's raining all the time. But it's probably that. I learned when I lived in Belfast for university and graduate school that when I walked into town, I'd walk 30 minutes into town. I'd go to church 30 minutes into town, and it would be soaking rain, and there would be old ladies standing in the rain talking like there was no rain. I never saw an umbrella ever. I never saw anybody covering their head with a newspaper or whatever. I never saw that. And I thought, okay, I remember the one day this happened. It was old ladies right by the city hall. And I remember looking at them and thinking, if these old ladies don't give a shit about the rain, if it doesn't bother them, why does it bother me or anyone else? And then I thought, there's a strength in that. If everyone else is miserable in a situation, then why don't I just, it's just a mindset. I just changed my mind and I love it. And since then I've always loved rain. I love rain. I love being outside and the fact that everyone else is miserable from this and that I feel like it's a beautiful thing, that not that they're miserable, that God sends us the rain. I love that. So anyway, I was looking down off this promontory and I saw the lakes. What lake was that? I forget what lake it was, but the mountains come down and form a hollow, and it's just the most perfect blue. It's the bluest blue. It's like God's blue. He just put blue right there, and it was like you could dive in and just drink all the water. You could just it was the water. It was like the materialized water of life right there. And I just stared at it for a long time. And then I was all alone. I kept walking up this trail. And eventually I walked about 10 miles, walking up this elevation. And at this point it was soaking. And there were no I had a cell phone, but it was a BT phone with a strip for a number. There was no, I didn't even think of texting or anything like that. There was no smartphone that didn't exist. I had a map. And so I thought, I'm going to have to walk another 10 miles to this youth hostel. And all of a sudden, I came across this little clearing, and there was a alpine house. Not a, it kind of like a ski lodge, but it was a house. And this old woman came out, and she was speaking to me in German with a smile on her face. And I asked her, do you speak English? She didn't speak English. And a dog came out, the dog sniffed me, and she opened her door and she waved like this. So she let me into her house. And this is like a fairy tale. It's crazy. And I went into her house. She motioned to her shoes. I can understand her German. German is very similar to English, but I can't speak it, But she told me to take my boots off, took my socks off, took my jacket off. She put them up next to the fire. She told me to relax. I sat at her table. She made me soup, made me some soup and bread. I just chilled there for probably about an hour and a half. And then after that, she gave me my clothes back. My clothes were warm. And I said, thank you so much. I thanked her. She hugged me. And I walked back outside, and it had stopped raining. And then I went up the mountain. I mean, that woman was an angel. Isn't that crazy? I'll never forget that woman. I'll never forget how she looked either. A big woman, big old woman, all alone in that house with her dog. And that woman was an angel. And I walked up the mountain. And by the way, I came to the youth hostel, and it was not 10 miles. It took I feel like it took another hour or something of walking. And then I got to a youth hostel, and then I stayed there. And then the youth hostel that I came to was, it was dark at this point. I came to the youth hostel, and this was like a actual alpine ski lodge. There was no one there. I went up to it. There was a box for a key. I got the key. I went inside. It had a honor pay, so I left some money. And I went upstairs. I was the only one there. I went into the attic of this place, and there were like 5 beds, all clean. I took a shower. There was food in a pantry. They had a phone. I remember calling my parents. It was a yellow phone. I called my parents from there, told them how I was doing. I kind of looked at the maps for the next day, and I went to sleep. And then I woke up the next day, and there was like a sea of clouds over the mountains. And then they cleared, and it was a bright, beautiful Swiss day in the springtime at Easter time. And I walked out, and I kept going. Isn't that crazy? So that was youth hosteling for me. That was my youth. I was 21 years old, all by myself. That trip. You know, they say that you need to do things like that to find yourself. I already knew myself, and I found myself, but I certainly I found like what it meant to really. I was already walking into the unknown in Europe anyway. I moved there, alone, but that was like truly alone. That for me was and I never felt alone. You know what I mean? So that was beautiful. So it was a little collie dog with a kind of a black and white tail. Very sweet. So anyway. So Dune 2. So here's what I'll wrap this up right here before I get to super chats. Thank you all for being here. Make sure that you like and share. Thanks for everybody showing up, and it was great to see our friend David Patrick Harry right there. Hasher. I hope Jamie and Jay are having a good time out there in LA. Shouts out to Thomas Henderson and Jason and Natasha, all the members out there. Real John Connor. I pray for you, John Connor. Shouts out to all my friends out there. I'm on the beginning of spring break here, so it's a good time. I'm going to see a lot more movies. I'm going to dive into. I need to. Somebody help me out here. Somebody help me out so I can get the six book Dune series, so I can dive into that. I'll cover that if you want me to. I'll cover the whole literary series. I will be doing Faust's. Goethe's Faust this week. Put it off so I can see all the Dune stuff, but. Yeah, we'll be going back into classical literature here and Faust, and we'll be doing that this week. I'm trying to cover a lot of stuff over these next 3 weeks. I got 3 weeks off, so I will be working a lot for you guys and for me, and it's fun. So here's what I have to say about Dune 2. Serious points to recap. First of all, this is the second part of a trilogy. They are certainly going to have Dune Messiah. Absolutely. They've already put into production a Dune TV series. What I hope does not happen, and I think this won't happen, is that they do what they did with Yellowstone and find a thing that they like and then totally soak the audience in it so that it gets stale very quickly. I don't think they're going to do that. There is going to be a TV series, but there was already a TV series. There was the Dune miniseries on the Sci-Fi Network, which you can watch on YouTube, called Children of Dune, and it is very good. When I was watching it, I was a little hesitant. I was thinking, oh no, we got Frosted Tips, we got Susan Sarandon. Get off my Tennessee Valley Authority on my cotton picking land, Susan Sarandon. But it's got Stephen Burkhoff in it. But guess what? It's very good. James McAvoy, I've already talked about him. But that aside, I mean, fuck it. I mean, the story, I think that the story is so good that it transcends this sort of production. And by the way, the production was not cheap in that. It's a Sci-Fi Network production, but they still spent a lot of detail on that. The worms were different. The worms were kind of creeping. They were more slug worms. But I think that's because it's moving towards the end of the worms. So that also makes sense. But, I think that what they're going to do with this is they're going to make the third one, and this to me is completely different from Lord of the Rings, and I like this a lot more than Lord of the Rings. I understand Lord of the Rings, and I was never into the books. I did read The Hobbit, and I read The Fellowship of the Ring, but that wasn't until I was older. I always avoided Lord of the Rings, and it's because of one of the things that it's kind of the same with Game of Thrones. It should be something that I like. It's got all of the elements that I like. I like knights. I like, high fantasy. I like stuff about wizards and all that stuff. But I think because of reading the C.S. Lewis books when I was in first grade, and because the Arthurian stories are, to me, the top. They're the top of literature. I think that the Arthurian books, the Grail Quest, to me, that is the absolute pinnacle of literature to me. And I don't even talk about it here because it's so important to me. I spent so much time on the Arthurian. I have a whole bookshelf here, a whole thing on all Arthurian lore, and it means so much to me. Especially because that when I was just talking about Switzerland, that's one of the reasons why I went on that trip. All I read for years was Arthurian, Chrétien de Troyes and Mallory and every translation and everything, every English translation of everything I could find about Arthurian stories. And I did that because the Grail to me is the Eucharist, and I think that that's the height of spiritual fiction. Christian spiritual fiction. The fictional, but I think there's so much more truth in that. So I avoided things like Lord of the Rings because of that. I just didn't want to sidetrack myself with it into something totally different. That doesn't mean that I think that I love it that people are into it. I think it's great, and I like those. Another reason is because there was a kid at my school who read The Hobbit every single day. All he carried around was The Hobbit, and this kid looked like a hobbit, and that bothered me. So I didn't want to read The Hobbit because I didn't want to access what this dude was into. I just didn't. But eventually I read it, and the reason I read it was because of how Robert Plant talks about the ringwraiths ride in black, and because of Strider. But then I was disappointed because in The Hobbit and Fellowship of the Ring there wasn't that much about Strider. I thought there would be more about Aragorn, but there wasn't. But this is totally different from that. Of course, every sort of epic series, especially every epic trilogy, is going to have similar themes because they're all based in the hero's journey. There are certain archetypes that we go through, but this is much more. This to me is much more. This is adult. It's really fleshed out in a way where every element seems to be accounted for, and there's something to think about. And my proof of that is just a personal proof, and that's that I can't stop thinking about it. That I know that. When literature affects me in this sense, or when a movie affects me in this sense especially, I know it's something special because I'm not black-pilled about movies. I love watching movies, but I have a very particular sense of what I think is good and what's not good, and there's so much more bad than good. I love movies. I love they exist. Even bad movies I get something out of, but rarely anymore am I affected by a movie in this way. I thought it was fantastic and beautiful and all-encompassing, and I want to know what happens. I want to be in the Dune world. I want to immerse myself in it and see what all these people have been on about. And I was very skeptical of that. I was skeptical of the reviews. I was skeptical of the performances. I was skeptical of everything having to do with it, and my mind has changed. And I already like Denis Villeneuve. I like all of his works. I think he's great. But this really was something great. And if you don't like it, I'm sure that's fine too. You might watch this and go, this is mid. And that's fine. That's fine. You might think, one comment said that they thought the pacing was off. It was too quick. And I get that. Because especially if you've read the books, you probably think there's so much more in this, and they're kind of glossing over it. But the way I saw it in the film, because I don't know the books, the film is that they didn't gloss over things. They were able to accomplish things in great sweeping sands of time in a few moments that were truthful to me. A look or a word or a phrase or a movement. The relationships in it are very true. I like the John the Baptist character Stilgar in this. The bad guys to me were so well done. It's so all-encompassing, and it's brand new. To me, this is totally going to change movies. Hollywood is going to see this, and they're going to go, oh, fuck. This is our thing. So that means that movies from now are going to take this type of aesthetic and this type of movie and the care that's created with this, and that's what they're going to go for. That's promising to me. Now, there's going to be a lot of shit. There's going to be a lot of derivative stuff, and it's all going to continue. This is hopeful to me because I was afraid especially after the strike and AI and all the stuff and all the tripe that we've been handed for so long, that movies were dead. I thought they were dead. And I've seen a couple of good movies. I thought The Zone of Interest was new. I thought Anatomy of a Fall was a new thing. There was a guy that won the Oscar for best original screenplay for that movie American Fiction at the Oscars, and he gave a speech when he won, and he said, "I'm so thankful that you gave me this because you accepted my screenplay." And he said, what he said was, "I'm just some black guy who wrote a script. And there's no reason why you should have read my script and made my movie with all the other stuff going on. But you did, and I'm here, and I'm thankful for that." Thought that was cool. He said, but then he said, "But what I would encourage you to do is, instead of making a $200 million movie next time with the main movie, why don't you make $201 million movies, right? Or make some $20 million movies, or make some, in other words, put care into the little things and make more of them." Okay. Now, just like in the record industry, with Taylor Swift being the what's the worm called? Taylor Swift is the Shokran of the Shao Kahn. What's the name? What's the damn worm's name? Taylor Swift is the big worm of the music industry. Okay, she makes an album, she does a tour, and the money that's generated allows all the smaller artists to make albums. That's the way the music industry is always done. They don't make any money off of selling music. It's always the tour. And, the big artists create so much that it pays for the little artists to have studio time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get that. Why would the company invest in them? Because all I care about is profits, right? So, I think that this movie, we have to have movies like this. But what they've done now is they've tried to make every movie one of those. And that doesn't work because now they're more in debt. And the people who run stuff do not have any creativity. They don't have any, they're just, soul-sucking fucking, culture creation. But occasionally we get a movie like this where they gave the guy artistic freedom and license, and he did the thing. And it's life-affirming. It's beautiful. It's a full work of art, this original. I don't know if there were compromises into this, but I thought it was really fantastic. So hopefully that there will be more of that. I think it's very promising. I see a lot of promising. I see this as extremely promising as far as movies go, and hopefully that will be the case, you guys. So Frankie D for $10 said, "Dune really reminds me of the movie Lawrence of Arabia, which, just because of the beauty of the set pieces and the color, is one of my favorite movies of all time. Maybe top one for me. Rocky ties." Well, look, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think there are Lawrence of Arabia elements in this, and they have to be because we're making a movie about sand and sand dunes. But they go further than that, especially, because remember the scene where they're going to attack the Harkonnen, and they expect him to come from that way and not from that way because it's uninhabitable and nobody can cross that desert. Well, that's why they train Paul to walk into the wilderness, because he's got to make one with the desert. They never lose a drop of their moisture. They completely exist in the ecosystem of the sand, and that's why they use the worms and cross the desert, and they sneak attack the big big colonial megaglorf, right? The Harkonnen. So I thought that was self-consciously Lawrence of Arabia, probably on the side of Frank Herbert. But he's Lawrence is an outsider. Lawrence, right? That scene in Lawrence of Arabia where he gets by the Turks is awful. I didn't realize that until I was older that's what's happening in that scene. But I thought it was very much that. And also I like that the prerequisites for this were kind of the reboots of Alien, right? Prometheus is obviously a kind of a foreshadowing of Dune in a way. It's the H.R. Giger and same sort of aesthetic. Now I get the whole dude at the beginning of Prometheus standing there on the world. He's about to colonize the world with the what do you call it? The panspermic world. I get why he's there, because it's the black sun. It's the same world. So, Dr. Crispy says, "My only fear is that if this film is so good as BLA says it is, that it will give Hollywood a new lease on life." Yeah, well, it is. It is going to give them a lease on life. But hopefully, Hollywood's going to be there. The movies aren't going to go, and I'm glad the movies are going to be there. We need them. We need the movies. Yeah, even though the movies are the movie industry is run by these, you know, by these, silly billies, hopefully we'll get some good stuff, and there will be some good people. So, there are some good people. We're all humans, but of course I guess probably a lot of the silly billies aren't human, right? So infested with devilry. But hopefully we'll get some good art. The movies aren't going anywhere for sure. But I'm gonna go back and read the books. So thanks everybody for being here. Let's get some super chats in. Let me read these. If you want to support me, you still got time here. You can do it anytime, really, but you can hit me up with where'd I go? Here I go. Where I go? Gucci. Where I go? Gucci. Where I go? Yeah, you want to hear Alex do the? You want to hear Alex do the Shadow Con again? Hold on. Okay, ready? Here's Alex after he first saw Dune. Can you hear that? You can't really see it. So you can't see it. All right. So that's Alex. Here's what they really sound like. You want to play what they really sound like? Hold on. Here's what they really sound like. What? Okay. I got to work on that one. All right, so let's get to some super chats here, you guys. Shouts out to Jason for that $10. He said, "Wall gooner, perfect terminology." Yep, yeah, he's the gooner. He's in his goon cave. You know what he's making? He's making that gicky gackers, right? I mean, when they get there, they say, "Look, King Leto, we're sorry, but you got a gooner in a goon cave in here. We built this whole thing for you." And Leto Atreides says, "Damn it! How could you let Gicky Gackers get in here?" And they're like, "What's Gicky Gackers?" And he's like, "I don't think you want to know." And they're like, "What is it?" And he's like, "It's stinky and sticky." So they get rid of that goon cave. I mean, that guy is in there with that Oculus on, and he's got like a Sega Genesis controller in his hand, and he's got his DSi right there or whatever, and he's like, that guy's nasty, right? He died in that goon cave. He gooned to death. Ugh, nasty. All right. Shouts out to Ethan right there. He sent me $10. He said, for that 21st Dune viewing, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And also, Leaves of Grass, has sponsored a stream on Westworld, and so there was a lot of Westworld time with that. I'm gonna get to Westworld for sure. Westworld season 1. There's some. I mean, I might pick some specific episodes to do that, but there's a lot of there is a lot of Westworld, but there's no AI. There's none of that in this world. But there, obviously, it's dystopian. So, but thank you for sponsoring that, Leaves of Grass, and also thank you again, Ethan. Appreciate that. Of course, really appreciate you. Let's see. Shouts out to Real John Connor out there who sent me $20. Cause you my boy, John Connor. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that on Cash App. Thank you. Let's see. If you want to, you can send this. Still got time to send in this PayPal right here. You can support me anytime. Also, make sure you email me at madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. You can do that. And got a lot in the works here, people. Okay, there's a PayPal. Let's see. Yep. All right. Come on, PayPal. Yo, shouts out to, let's see. Yeah, shouts out to, let's see. NP. I don't know if you want me to say your name. I don't want to dox anybody on here, but PayPal showed me your name, so I don't want to say it. Let's say NP. Shouts out to NP out there for $10. He says for Dune 2. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Yo, shouts out to our friend TH, Thomas Henderson. We know Thomas Henderson's name, so we can say that. Right, Thomas Henderson, thank you so much. Sounds like a really Bazed movie. Thanks for the analysis. We'll be watching it later this week. Awesome. Yes, you go see the movie, you guys. I think you'll like it. If you don't like it, let me know. Tell me what's up. He says $25. Thank you, Thomas Henderson. Really appreciate that. You're awesome. Jason sent that $10 on PayPal. Thank you, Jason. Let's see. Also, I got a Venmo here. If you like Venmo, you can send me on Venmo, you guys. Yeah. That's Hans Zimmer soundtrack. Oh, by the way, look, man, I've criticized Hans Zimmer a lot, and what I realized about Hans Zimmer is that Hans Zimmer is hit or miss. Okay, he is great in his soundtrack for Dune and Dune 2. Fantastic. He's a miss for me for his Christopher Nolan soundtracks because it's like in the I've said before about how the Christopher Nolan movies, Hans Zimmer is pushing the emotion that we should feel by playing music the entire time. It's a kind of a synthetic droning soundtrack where we're constantly anxious. And I get it. I get what he's trying to do there, but for me it's a bit derisory, okay? With this, I think what he's doing, I actually think the reason that here's my hot take about Hans Zimmer. I think I figured this out. So, who's the guy who did the soundtrack for is it Blade Runner 2049? Let me look this up. Hold on. Blade Runner. He's an Icelandic guy. And he died, unfortunately. I think he had like a speedball OD or yayo OD or something, which sucks. No. Okay, that was Hans Zimmer. But what's the Icelandic guy who did the soundtrack? Maybe it was Sicario? It's got to be Sicario because he worked with Villeneuve earlier. What's this guy's name? Composer. Yes. Okay, so this guy's name was Johan Johansson. And he was awesome. He did Sicario and Arrival. And he did Mandy. All right. And yeah, he did Mandy, right? Enough said. This guy fucking ruled, okay? And his soundtrack for Sicario is the one that has the boom. You know, it's like the deep droning synth that like shakes your bones. And so I think what happened, here's my hot take, is that when Johan Johansson OD'd and was gone, unfortunately, RIP, Villeneuve needed a replacement, so we got Hans Zimmer, who's the closest thing to that. So Hans Zimmer did the same thing, and then he made Blade Runner 2049. And Blade Runner 2049 also has that reddish sand dune looking atmosphere, especially when they go to Vegas and it's totally it's soaked in red, which by the way was predictive because that came. Remember in 2020 when San Francisco was completely soaked in red, and but I remember when I saw that in IMAX, like I was almost sick from that synthetic sound because you know I'm sensitive to like a low and high frequency noise, and that really and all the red on the screen. I mean, I almost puked when I saw that. But I think that is why Hans Zimmer is doing this with Villeneuve, right? So he's taking he's he's imitating or purposely, consciously, as an homage, I guess, a Johan Johansson sort of score. That's my hot take for that. But regardless, I think the soundtrack for this is good, except for the fact that there is a lot of. I did look at the score for this movie for Dune 2, and there are let's say there are 19 songs in the score, and I found about 9 of them that have the same thing. No, no. So, Zimmer just look, I'm going to play a little joke on these people. I'm going to give you the same fucking song and call it something else every time. No. But it is good. I like how it works. It's good in the movie. You remember the first movie, though, when Paul is walking up and he first gets to Arrakis and they're the palm trees? That guy's wearing a bee bonnet on his head. You see that? He's like, yo, man, I'm wearing a bee bonnet on my head. Right? And he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm watering the palm trees. There's only 3 palm trees left. I'm the most important motherfucker in the galaxy. I like that scene. I like what the dude's wearing. Because the Bene Gesserit wear these tall hats. Right? Because they wear these tall hats, which is kind of an Egyptian, I guess it's an Egyptian homage. Right? Yeah, it's kind of the same homage, right? It's like in Black Hawk Down when they paint the target with the laser, and then they come in with the Apaches and the AC-130s, and they're just smoking the whole city, and then it's like da, 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 oh, oh, oh. So, yeah, it's the sound of the Berbers, and the I guess the auditory call of the Sanhedrin. Right? Yeah, you guys are right. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So that's Hans Zimmer. Okay, let's see our other super chats here. No, we'll finish up here. Yo, shouts out to Crystalline. She said, Harkonnen, $5. Thank you so much for that super chat. Thank you to M Space AV Map as always. Thank you. You're awesome for that $20. Go after that space fraud. Thank you so much for that super chat. That's awesome. Thank you to Yik Yak Tallywhack JW for that $10 super chat. Thank you to Hesher again for that $20. You are the most based, Hesher. Appreciate you. Thank you to Frankie D for that $10. Dune really reminds me of Lawrence of Arabia. Luchador dropped me $5. Let's fucking go. Thank you so much. I think that's it. Did I hit them all? Let me make sure I hit them all. You guys, make sure that you grab a membership if you want. We're gonna be doing some more member streams. I moved Spring Breakers over to the member stream. And then grab a membership there anytime. Really appreciate you. You guys, if you want to help me out. Oh, by the way, I have no car. My car broke down again. Not like it's necessary for this, but so I tried calling them today, by the way, and they just it rang twice and then beep, deny. So hopefully I still have a car. But I haven't had one all weekend. And I know it's gonna pour some more money into it, of course. So I don't have a car for spring break. But you know what? It doesn't bother me. And here's why it doesn't bother me, people. This is why we shouldn't get anxious about big money things that concern us like this. Because you know what? It's a concrete problem. It's a concrete problem. It's physical. It has an engine. The guy can fix it or he can't. There's nothing I can do about it except for hope to get it fixed and pay for it. And I can't afford to get a new car. I can't afford to do anything. But I can't even afford to get it fixed. But I'll deal with it when I can, right? And do what I can when I can. I think that's a good way. Do you guys think that's a good way to be? I think it's a good way to be. What am I going to stress about it? I'm on vacation, I'm chilling. So I need to go and get stuff, but it is what it is. That's what they say, isn't it? It is what it is. Nothing I can do about that. That's not a deep mental problem. That's not a spiritual problem. It's just a car, right? So, and I've dealt with this so many times anyway, so it's whatever. Anyway, it's annoying though, isn't it? Yo, shouts out to PC Baz. Yeah, welcome to High IQ Book and Joy. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the support you guys give me. Hey, make sure you like and share the stream. Make sure you hit that like button. It really means a lot to me in getting this into the algorithm, so more people can see us here. Tell your friends and family, come watch me, hang out with us in the live chat, or just watch, right? But make sure that they subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. You can email me at madmaximalism at 2x's with 2x's at gmail.com. You can support me at Bazed Analyzer at Cash App and PayPal. Links are in the video description and in the channel description. You can hit any of the video descriptions, hit that down button, and you see for the literary streams, you'll see a brief literary essay, not just a synopsis, but an essay with my thesis statement for all those streams. This one is just a movie stream, and it's different from all the other ones. We just did movies, not the book. So I'm an outsider, but hopefully you guys will welcome me into the Dune community because I want to be a full Dooner, right? Dude, man, I could worm surf the shit out of that thing, dude. Worm surfing, right? Pretty cool. Pretty cool, the movie. Go see the movie and watch some movies and read some books. Have a good time. It's March, right? And St. Patty's was yesterday. I hope everybody had a good St. Patrick's Day. Sláinte to you out there, Crispy. Appreciate y'all. And that's about all I got. So let's hit it, okay? Let's get after it. Hope everybody has a good rest of the month. And I'll see you probably in a couple of days covering Faust. And where's my Ice Glide? To play us out, where'd my Ice Glide go? Dang. To play us out, here's Sting and a cut off his new album. Let's go.
Say what?
Cheers. Drinking my blue juice. Drinking my spice juice.
Let the beat rock. Say what?
Was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. Peace, y'all. I love you.